do you want to, hello, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. Good evening, good evening. Can everybody hear me? Hello. Welcome everybody to the Clarkson Community Church. My name is Ryan. I work for Council Avantejo, and I'll be your host for this evening. I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to this fabulous church to have our play conversation tonight. We have a lot of people here, so if everybody could just take one moment to scooch closer to the train tracks if you can, so we can allow more people to come in. We're over 500 people signed up for this, so we're expecting a big crowd. Even online, we have over 150 people attending and joining us tonight. With that, if there's anybody who is not able to join us tonight, there will be a recording available of tonight's presentation, available on Councillor Tejo's website, alvintejo.ca. With that, I would like to begin. Welcome everybody. We have many neighbors joining us for tonight's meeting. This is a really great turnout, and I'm once again thankful for each and every one of you for showing up tonight. My name is Ryan. I work with Councillor Tejo, and I'll be the host for this evening, as well as the moderator for the Q&A period. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the lands in which constitute present-day City of Mississauga as being part of the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and Wyandot nations. We recognize these peoples and their ancestors as peoples who inhabited these lands since time immemorial. The City of Mississauga is home to many global Indigenous peoples. As a municipality, the City of Mississauga is actively working towards reconciliation by confronting our past and our present, providing space for Indigenous peoples within their territory to recognize and uphold their treaty rights and to support Indigenous peoples. We formally recognize the Anishinaabe origins of our name and continue to make Mississauga a safe space for all Indigenous peoples. If I could get the next slide, please, I will go over this evening's agenda. I will not talk a bit about the agenda. Tonight we'll go quickly over some housekeeping items and how to take part in the meeting. We'll hear opening remarks from Councillor Tejo and Jamie Bay, pastor of here at the Clarkson Community Church, and then hear briefly from Q from the City of Mississauga Planning and Building, and Archana from the Region of Peel Housing Services. We will then go over to Indwell, where they will present their plan for the neighborhood. After this, there'll be 1 hour for clarification, questions, and discussion. However, as long as the discussion is lively, we will keep going as long as we need. Now I will go over some of the housekeeping items before we begin tonight's meeting. Next slide, please. As discussed, tonight's session is being recorded and will be posted on the councilor's website, alvintejo.ca, should you want to rewatch it or share with anybody who is unable to attend tonight's meeting. Next slide. We have 1 hour for discussion tonight, and we can continue the conversation if needed. We have found the most productive conversations on this platform happen when we get to hear your question, so we prefer that you save your question and comments for the discussion periods. Given tonight's hybrid setup, we'll be taking most of our questions from those in the room tonight. Please raise your hand and a member of our team will come by with a microphone so we can all hear your question. For those attending virtually, you can comment or question in the chat. We won't be answering the questions in the chat directly. We will take them and address them, as many as we can, during our discussion period this evening. It is important to me that we take time to have a respectful and productive discussion tonight, and I will do my best to make sure those who want to provide feedback get a chance to do so. However, if we are unable to get to your question, I ask that you follow up with Councillor Tejo, and we will answer it directly. We will make sure to post the councillor's information in the chat at the end of the meeting for those attending virtually, or for everybody in this room, you can find the councillor's information at alvintejo.ca. Next slide. I'd like to now pass it over to Councillor Tejo to say a few words.
Hello. All right. Thank you very much, Ryan. As Ryan said, we live in one of the best communities in Mississauga, one of the most engaged neighborhoods, I think the most engaged neighborhood in all of the city, and I'm very, very proud of that. So I do want to thank you first and foremost for coming out tonight to raise your issues, raise your concerns, have your questions, and have a respectful conversation. I think it's great that you are all so interested in this project, and I think that's going to be very valuable for city staff, regional staff, as well as the developer to hear your feedback and to hear your concerns. This is an open and collaborative process. We want to make sure everybody is heard, and so I really want to thank you all for coming out here tonight, first and foremost. I think one of the other important things that we're going to be talking about today is really the future of our community and our neighborhood, and I think that's an important piece as well. I think we know that there's a context, a larger context with the provincial and federal government in terms of housing. We're going to talk about that as well. But obviously, what we want to do is we were trying to build a vibrant and collective community that supports one another. And so I really appreciate all of you coming out today and sharing those concerns. I'll have some other comments later on, and I'll be part of the Q&A as well. So looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I get the next slide, please? I'd like to pass it over to Jamie Bay, pastor of the Clarkson Community Church.
So good evening. My name is Jamie Bay, and I'm the lead pastor here at Clarkson Community Church. And I also want to take a moment to welcome you this evening. Some of you may know me as the chair of the Clarkson Village BAA, and many of our BAA board are here tonight to listen and to learn along with you. But that's not the hat that I'm wearing tonight. Tonight I'm up here as the pastor of this church, Clarkson Community Church, and I really do want to welcome you here this evening. I want to tell you that I am really grateful that you are here. I'm grateful you're here for 3 reasons. Number one, you are here because you care about Clarkson. Every single person in this room is somebody who cares about this neighborhood. We might have different opinions on how to do that well. We might have different views on what's important for our neighborhood, but when you look around tonight, the people sitting around you are all people who care about this neighborhood. And in a society that often separates and polarizes people with different opinions, we are together in one room as people who care about this neighborhood. And for that, I am incredibly grateful. Number 2, I'm grateful that you are going to have the opportunity to hear from Indwell. I've been a pastor here at this church for 13 years, and I've known Indwell for 7 of those years. I've spent time with their staff, I've spent time in their buildings, and I am grateful that you are going to get to hear from them tonight. Over the past few weeks, I have heard a lot of misinformation about who Indwell are and what they do, and I know that all of us want to make our decisions and voice our opinions based on information that is true. There's no one I trust more to tell us about the truth in this project than the team from Indwell. So I am grateful that you have made the time to hear from them tonight. And finally, I am really grateful that we are talking about the challenge of homelessness. In the 13 years that I've been here, this has been the number one challenge that we have been unable to help with in a sustainable way. In the last municipal election, 5 of the candidates who were running all asked to meet with me, and they all discussed ways that we could reduce homelessness. My office in this building faces Lakeshore, and there is barely a day that goes by that I do not see or talk to people experiencing homelessness. Clarkson has people living in cars, people living in tents, people sleeping on benches, people sleeping in parking garages, people sleeping on couches, people staying in motels, people jumping from friend to friend, staying a few nights at a time. And in the conversations on social media over the past few weeks, I have seen many of you bring up new ideas and new possibilities, and I hope that we continue to work on those beyond tonight, beyond this project. But I am really grateful that we are having these conversations. But for tonight, I welcome you. I invite you to listen well, to ask questions, to share your thoughts when you have the opportunity, and then when the meeting is done, to continue your conversations over cookies and coffee afterwards, because the Clarkson Community Church family people have bought cookies for us to eat afterwards, and we don't want those to go to waste tonight. Let me hand back to Ryan as we continue through tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Jamie. With that, I'd like to invite Hugh Manager Development for the Southern Area from the City of Mississauga to share a few comments.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm just going to set a little bit of the context in terms of the legislative and regulatory environment that we in the Planning and Building Department work in, and how we deal with these applications. And then we'll talk a little bit about the process and regulations around what's being done here before we get into the project itself. As we the point of the slide that is really can't really be read too well, but the point really is every day we're on the news listening to stories about the housing crisis that's facing North America and Canada and very much the GTA. And all three levels of government currently are undertaking strategies to address a housing strategy and the housing problem through a variety of means. And all three are promoting a mix of housing and a range of housing to meet that demand. Next slide, please. So just to set a little bit of context of the work that I work on, the decision making that governs these sorts of applications occurs within a very legislative environment. The Ontario Planning Act really guides everything that we do in terms of decision making. So, municipalities are sometimes called creatures of the province. That we take that direction from provincial statute in how we behave. So, when dealing with land use decisions in Mississauga, we have to work under that legislative environment. We deal with provincial policies through a provincial policy statement and through a growth plan that generally directs municipalities to take on intensification and provide for a range of housing for residents in all areas within the urban boundary. Municipalities are also required to have official plans. So official plans are broader policy documents that set out land uses and how the city should develop. Here in the city, we have a regional official plan and the Mississauga official plan. So, in this case, there's policy direction about that the site is part of the Clarkson Main Street commercial core, towards the edge of it, and provides some direction around development. And then we have the municipal land use controls. The first one being the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw is the technical bylaw that implements that official plan. So while the official plan says, this area will be residential, this area will be commercial, this area will be industrial, that sort of thing, the bylaw brings it to this next level of, okay, here's what's permitted on these lands, here's the list of permitted uses, here's the heights and the setbacks, those sorts of things, the performance of the site itself. Usually when we're having these types of community meetings, we're doing so because developers are coming in and proposing something different from what the municipality and the community had anticipated for the site in terms of the built form. In this case, Indwell isn't proposing to rezone the land. They're proposing to use the zoning rights that have been established on the land since 2007 that permit a Main Street commercial context, being a commercial at grade, retail at grade, apartments above, like you see elsewhere in Clarkson. So none of that's that change hasn't been proposed. So when you use that zoning entitlement and that zoning right, really you can proceed to a process called site plan and building permit with the city. And site plan really deals with the engineering of the site and the layout of the site. It's a technical review by staff and agency to just make sure the site works properly as it's developed. And then building permits deal with the structure itself. So I think what I'm saying is I just want to distinguish the site a little bit in that it's not a rezoning application. The zoning entitlement already exists for the site. So Indwell, as property owner, has come to propose a building that fits within that zoning bylaw. There is a process that some of you may be familiar with called Committee of Adjustment. That process deals with variances to the zoning bylaw. So quite often in development, there are aspects of a proposal or a building that doesn't quite work or doesn't quite fit, and they need some sort of minor relief. And that's what the Committee of Adjustment's role is. It's to assess those asks. We anticipate that there'll be some of those requests as we go through this process and start dealing with the plan review for the application. So you might see Committee of Adjustment notices go out and at a future date. Right now, though, we just haven't undertaken that review. So I think that pretty much summarizes sort of where we are as a city in terms of the approval process for the site, but I'll be available for some of the questions and answers if need be.
Thank you, Hugh.
And with that, the region.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate it. I'd like to turn it over to our friends of the Region of Peel, Archana from Health and Human Services, but you're doing housing development in particular.
Good evening, everyone. As Ryan mentioned, I'm Archana Vyas. I am Manager Development Systems and Services in Housing Services Division at Region of Peel. And I'm pleased to be here today to speak to you about housing needs in our community. So we'll learn from Indwell about the project in detail. However, what I'm going to talk about, it's not something that you don't know. You already know that people are facing housing affordability challenges in our community. We can go to next slide, please. So earlier in May this year, we brought a report to our regional council to talk about housing affordability challenges. And as you can see on the slide, there's a lot of information in there. But one thing that I do want to share with you is there are about 91,000 households in Peel region that are living in core housing need, meaning they are living in a housing situation that is either unaffordable to them or they're living in housing that's unsuitable to them or their needs. And I want to zone in on the slide where I've circled the piece about supportive housing. So supportive housing, people who are having low income, but not having housing stability or not able to keep their housing because of their conditions, either mental health conditions, physical health, they might have gone through some trauma, they might have gone through some other challenges in their lives, and they need particularly supportive housing. So when we look at the need and look at the numbers on the slide, it's about 4,500 units that we need in Peel region. And we currently have 141 units. So you can appreciate, we're currently meeting only 3% of the supportive housing need that we have in our community. That's a pretty big gap. We can move to the next slide as well. Thank you. So a little bit about Region of Peel and Region of Peel Council as service manager for housing. So council here wears many hats. Two of those hats are creating new affordable housing, supportive housing in our community, creating new shelter to meet the needs in our community. And the second is administer funding that we receive from federal and provincial governments. So currently, region and Housing Development Office or Housing Development Team, we are leading housing development, affordable housing development, as well as shelter projects on land that is owned by Region of Peel and Peel Housing Corporation. And we are also overseeing projects that are led by third party like Indwell, because they are receiving federal or provincial funding. In our case, it's the Rapid Housing Initiative funding that we are receiving. So I want to highlight one thing. Building housing takes time. It's a process. And when you look at the numbers, don't be discouraged. I want to say since 2019, we have created, in collaboration with partners like Indwell, we have created about 400 units, and 1,100 are in development but it takes time. And those 400, I'm actually counting the 68 units that we've created through Lakeshore Lofts project. So while we are building, we're creating, we're trying, the need is great in our community. And I'll pass it on to Graham.
Thank you so much. I'm actually just going to introduce Indwell to come up today because I think the context was important in terms of where we are in the development process, because the development application is not, in fact, a development application. There does need to be site approval and a building permit, as well as potentially a committee of adjustment decision. But I wanted to facilitate this meeting for everybody because I think it's really important that neighbors get the opportunity to talk with the developer and the applicant about the process. And so Indwell, while not required to come to this meeting, has been very gracious in being able to come here because they do want to work with the community and be partners. So I do want to thank them for taking the time and bringing all the staff here and to answer all the questions. So without further ado, come on up. Thank you.
Fantastic, and I just want to echo the appreciation we've already heard, and on behalf of my colleague Jess Brand, who's one of our regional managers responsible for Mississauga, say thank you for coming out tonight. This is a tremendous response to a need in our community, and we take your presence here as direct feedback to us that we have a highly invested community that is looking for solutions and actually wants to understand and move in the direction of cooperation. We've been in audiences similar to this before, and the hostility is super palpable. Where there's a sense of anger, there's a sense of fear, everybody starts with their arms crossed. And that's not what we're experiencing here tonight, and I want to appreciate that, express appreciation for that right up front. I can tell you also have a lot of questions. So the practical reality is that Exactly. And so I think that this is it. Arshana mentioned that that huge waiting list is needed, and we know that the housing need in Mississauga is super overwhelming. Indwell's experience in Mississauga goes back like 10 years, and we've been able to work on 2 projects so far. But sometimes circumstances come together where we are not, where things move quickly, and sometimes things take forever. So we want to talk about that issue tonight, about how this project came together. But as we, just to give some context, and I think maybe this microphone is causing feedback, so I'll just switch to the other one, Jamie. Is that better if I just use that one? Yeah, okay. We'll flip through a few slides just to give you some quick context. And then I will talk about some of these things. Jess will talk about some of the programs specifically. Go to the next slide there, Jamie. Kind of 4 key areas, some of our history and experience, the program model, a project overview, and of course the most important part, Q&A. The next slide is one of our buildings in Hamilton. You can barely see it there with the light, but this project here in Clarkson is about our 24th project. So we're not starting from scratch in terms of experience. Every single time we work on a project, we go through a process of listening, of discernment, of responding to community needs. Because our next slide there points out why we exist. Our mission is to create affordable housing communities for people seeking health, wellness, and belonging. Our vision is hope and homes for all. And fundamentally, we're rooted in our faith as a faith-based organization that we have to love our neighbors as ourselves. That includes you, that includes us, that includes our tenants. We have to act out of a sense of hope for a better future, because a lot of our tenants, actually a lot of us, experience hopelessness in all kinds of ways. And we do believe fundamentally in the dignity of all people. That includes you, that includes our neighbors, that includes those who are going to be housed with us. And so those are our values that we act out of. The next two slides are both just sort of quick examples. If you've gone on our website, you've already seen these. We are committed to building buildings that work, buildings that are beautiful, buildings that are environmentally sustainable, that will stand the test of time. It's not the only feature of our buildings isn't the affordability, but things like energy efficiency. I think that slide shows it there. Whether it's solar panels, whether it's designing to passive house principles, Canada, we're all in this climate crisis together. And so one of the things Indwell has done is say, well, we're going to commit to building buildings that are responsible for the long term. So, you know, it's more than just doing one thing at a time. We have to try to do as many possible public benefits as we do every single project. So you see the next two slides there. I think they were recent. Well, one's not recent. One's at the beginning of the project, and one's recent. Of our project in Streetsville. Some of you are aware that we're redeveloping the old Streetsville retirement residence, it was called. You definitely didn't want to retire there. It was not a condition that anybody should be living in. And fortunately, we were able to rescue most of the tenants who had been living there. In a maybe quieter setting, we can talk to you about some of the successes, some of the complete life transformations we've already seen with folks who had been abused, highly institutionalized in that setting. But we're able to turn those historic buildings and a new infill project there into 40 new apartments. And again, a community that was engaged, a community that provided a lot of feedback, and a counselor that helped navigate a process to get to a project that's actually going to have such a tremendous value to our community. We're not about winning awards, but it sure is nice when we do. And the thing is that we're not just building, doing the right thing for the right reasons about sort of poverty and alleviation. We're building buildings that our communities are proud of. And even most recently, a couple weeks ago in Hamilton, we won an Urban Design Award for the recent Oaks project. It was conversion and adaptive reuse of a former industrial site in downtown Hamilton. The reason I talk about that is because we've heard from a lot of you, you're concerned about the design, you're concerned about the aesthetics, you're concerned about the built quality of the project here in Clarkson, and so that's important to us too. And I'm just saying what people have told me, and so those are key things that I've heard. So now we'll get to some of the. I've met at least one person here tonight who brought that up to me. They said it's not going to be blue like the one down the road, is it? So it's not going to be blue like the one down the road. Don't worry about that. Transparent would be interesting, but glass is not that great for Passive House, but we'll come back to that. I'll let Jess talk a bit about the program model, because I think for a lot of you, the concerns do relate to what does a standard support building mean for Indwell? And so, between Jess and I, we'll cover that as we go through this presentation, but I'll pass the mic to Jess.
Thanks, Graham. No, is this on? Okay, no, this one is on now. Okay, my name is Jess. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to talk a bit about our program model. To qualify for being an Indwell tenant, people need two things. They need to desire affordability and a desire to participate in a supportive housing community. As we talk about supported housing, this is a particular set of affordable housing. As we look at affordability, you know this already, but for folks who are living on a limited income, such as ODSP or Old Age Security or Canada Pension Plan, those fixed incomes have stayed fixed as the cost of housing has gone up. So we know there's a need for affordable housing. But as people age in community, as people go through seasons of life, supports are also a vital part to help people stay housed. So we're going to move to this slide here. This is Indwell in Mississauga. You know that we have already one building operating, and we have a building that is under construction. And then we're talking about tonight's site. So I just want to highlight Indwell operates housing across a range of supports. So when someone is entering their housing journey, perhaps coming directly out of homelessness or out of challenges, they need more support than at a different time in life. Indwell operates our supportive housing programs along a continuum accordingly. So folks who are looking for an enhanced level of support, that's what we talk about, an enhanced level of support. That's what our Streetsville program is intended to be. Streetsville will have a multidisciplinary staff team, an interdisciplinary staff team to be able to help folks who are coming out of homelessness to be able to stay housed, to stabilize, and to live well in community. Our Lakeshore Lofts program kind of falls in the in-between. It's in a bit of the middle. We've got some folks there, as you know, who moved from Streetsville, who needed additional supports. We're also directly in proximity to the Compass, where there's a lot of supports and meals and things that folks need. So that program is offering kind of an in-between, a medium level of support. When we're looking at this project here, Clarkson, So it says standard there, 1639 Lakeshore Road West. This is intended to be a standard support program. Standard meaning folks are living quite independently. They still need affordability and they still need supports to maintain health, wellness, and belonging. It is a lower level of support than what we're offering in other buildings because people aren't looking for that and they don't need that. That's not what they need at this stage in life. It actually creates an opportunity for someone, when they need more support, to perhaps move to a building where there is more support. Or if they've received that support in that one building and they no longer need it because they've been living for years in stability and they want to move to less support, they can do that. That's what we're aiming to achieve, a continuum of support so that folks have options within the community. And the site and all of the different sites are kind of chosen with that in mind. The proximity to different things in the neighborhood, what's around them, how you get on the bus route, all of those pieces are part of Indwell's process in deciding where we're going to go and what is the program going to look like. And this neighborhood is part of what makes the decision around what's going to happen, because we're only successful when our building community can integrate into the community. And we will continue to work with the community so that we have that. That's part of creating an affordable housing community. It's for the folks who live in the building, but it's for the broader community as well. And so we stay together as neighbors. We don't just build a building and walk away from it, sorry. We stay engaged, we stay available, we stay connected. So this is it. This is our range of supports. We have standard, we have enhanced, and then we have everything kind of in between. And they wrap around folks based on how much need they have at a particular time and across this continuum of supports. Moving along, so these are examples of some of our Indwell buildings. This is a one-bedroom, so our one-bedroom apartments are intended to be places where people can live in a healthy way, right? A full kitchen, place where people can prepare meals, can have guests over who are their family or maybe their grandchildren. Sometimes we have university students. Our tenants, they gather together at holidays, they hold potlucks, they volunteer in the community. Pictured here are some folks from Norfolk. Our Norfolk tenants hold a fundraiser. They rent out their parking lot for the fair so that they can raise money for kids to buy presents for kids at Christmas, kids who are living with cancer. We also, so here, this newspaper article talks about how core policing calls for our St. Thomas housing program. Now that is an enhanced support program, not the kind of program we're planning here, but our police calls plummeted. The other thing that plummets, though, across Indwell programs, whether it's an enhanced program, a standard support program, the thing that happens is that people's emergency room use reduces, people's hospital use decreases, because people are living well in community. They're actually able to care for one another, they're able to travel to their family doctor, they can see a specialist, they can get to where they need to go because our staffing support help maintain people in community, reducing the need for emergency services. More and more, though, people need to belong. We all need to belong. So here's a collection of pictures of folks who are, some of them are our volunteers, some of them are our tenants. We all need to belong. And that's really what we're after. We're after creating health and wellness and belonging. And so we want to talk together tonight to help build that belonging in a community. We all need a place. And so what does that look like in this neighborhood? We're going to share a short video from one of our tenants. This tenant is an advocate in the community.
I'm a 70-year-old, low-income, widowed senior, been close to 9 years widowed, and I've been with Indwell 1 year.
Before becoming a tenant with Indwell, I was pretty much homeless. I did a lot of couch surfing, and I ended up in a basement for 18 months that I hated. And then I got a call that I was getting an interview with Indwell. And here I am.
It means a lot because I get to meet new people, try new things, even sports outside. And the people in the community around here is what I really enjoy.
Well, Indwell, when you really think of the name, it kind of thinks of, it's kind of on the line of helping people that are homeless and don't have a place to live, and kind of helps them out, get back on the right track and on their meds and planning meals, good meals, not bad meals.
I was able to become more independent and my mental health became more stable because I was taking my medication properly.
The programs that is here at Indwell, it's really good because it helps to bring people together. And a lot of people are shy, and when they come out, it makes a lot of difference, not sitting inside your unit and, being depressed or being bored. And there is so many different programs. You're not limited to one thing. There's, exercising, there's card playing, so everyone can participate.
Yeah, I got quite ill for a while there, over a year, and Indwell was there for me for the whole thing. They took me to appointments. They even came, excuse me, they even came all the way to London with me, and I would say if they weren't there, I might have died, honestly.
Well, staff impacted me, trying to get me to stay on my meds. I keep on going off them, I gotta stay on them. They impacted me about keeping on my meds and making my sugars be right, because I'm diabetic, and they've helped out a lot keeping me on the meds. If not, I wouldn't have been on them at all. Yeah.
It means everything. It means my own private space. I can relax, rejuvenate, regroup. I can cook for myself because I have my own fridge.
For my future right now, mentally, I'm in such a better place that I'm now looking for something part-time to do as far as work goes. And now, being in a better place, I can actually say I do see a light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm just gonna keep moving forward.
Yeah, thanks very much. I want to acknowledge that the last gentleman there, Richard Antonio, some of you might recognize him. He was one of our tenants at Lakeshore Lofts and tragically died this weekend. Just some health issues, and so he's a big hole. He's left a big hole in our community just in the last week. But talking with Jamie, he's been a part of this community here at the church. He's been a part of advocacy in this neighborhood and across Peel region for a long time, saying, we've got a lot of people who are being left behind, and how do we create the kind of housing that we need? And so I just want to acknowledge Richard and the legacy he left in advocating for the kind of solutions a lot of people need. Jess talked a little bit about the program model and this being a standard support program. We acknowledge the weakness or the shortcomings of a word like standard. It doesn't sound like it offers that much. But fundamentally, our experience is that when people's lives have stabilized, we know that mental health can be something that is a lifelong condition. We know that even addictions are things which you don't necessarily get over and leave behind. But they're things that we can work through and work past and keep at bay. But we know that supports around us, each of us actually, is something that's often necessary, especially when family bonds break down, especially when work or other kinds of things that we kind of rely on falter. What happens when we lose our housing, and how do you rebuild from that? Standard support for Indwell means a place of long-term housing, a long-term tenancy, of long-term affordability, permanent affordability, and of stability. And even I myself lived in one of Indwell's buildings for 4 years, as a neighbor, as a support worker, as a colleague, and as a friend. And you realize that our neighbors were very, very similar to my wife and I, but their life experience had gone through different kinds of traumas than we'd experienced, and yet we had so much in common. When our neighbor got mugged on the street at Christmas time for her money, it wasn't somebody from our building who stole it. It was somebody in the neighborhood. Where did she come for support? She came back to the building, came back to the community where she called home. And we worked together, to help her personally, but also to report to the police and all those other things. Because fundamentally, this is who we are as neighbors, and this is what we do as an organization. The building here that we're proposing at 1639 Lakeshore, like Hugh said, is a building that complies with the zoning in terms of the needs, what's allowed in terms of the type of building. It's got ground floor commercial. It's got, at the back of the ground floor, we're intending to have amenity spaces for the tenants with residential on 3 stories above that. That all fits within the official plan and what's allowed. And then we just will work through some of those variances, which is what we're working on defining right now. An input that you have for us, we've heard about sort of like how's the garbage going to be picked up, and sight lines for the Dairy Queen, and what's the cladding going to be like, and what about overlook. These are all the kind of things that we have to work through now as part of that process. But some of the slides that you can see up there have gone past some of the renderings. There's some better, or maybe closer up pictures you can see here at the front later on. That slide that's up there, the next one is the draft site plan. You can see when you lay it out on the site, there's restrictions at the back in terms of you can't put the building within 7.5 meters of the property line because of the creek and all of those sorts of things. So obviously we have to work with conservation. We have to work with the fact, it's a huge plus for this site to have the Turtle Creek back there, to have the conservation area, to have so much nature just visible for the building. So we want to really maximize tenants' visual enjoyment of that. Obviously we can't climb down into the ravine. There's going to be fencing and things like that. So that's all part of the process. But working within the zoning, working within the commercial Main Street and the mixed use and Greenland official plan uses, that's all part of what our process is. And we actually have been able to work, we had a meeting a couple weeks ago at the Craftsman, our neighbors there with the condo project. And one of the requests that came out of that meeting was, would it be feasible for even one of our members as neighbors to sort of join into or participate with that, with the site plan process. This, as the councillor said, this isn't a normal thing. This isn't normal for a developer to say, sure, come to our meetings at City Hall, come, to the site plan conversation. But practically speaking, we do operate as a trustee of the public good. As a registered charity, we are stewards of public funds. We can issue tax receipts. We have to have a level of transparency that is completely different than a market developer. And so we've offered that, and somebody from the Craftsman will be participating with us in those meetings at City Hall and such, so that there is that line of communication back to our neighbors and back to you collectively as our community. That slide there is a draft sort of layout of the ground floor. You can see we've got offices for Indwell at the front. We've got a commercial space that's obviously both a zoning requirement, but also we'd like to have a great commercial tenant there. We have heard concerns. Is this going to be another Compass? I was talking to some folks who've been a part of, well, actually a number of you I know are supporters of the Compass. I see some folks who are here on the board, staff. I know that many of you already probably collect for the Compass. They've had 100% increase in demand for their services this year. So this is not because they're out there promoting their product and trying to sell. It's because of the reality of poverty in our community and the need for this kind of resource center. So without saying, without casting any shade on what the Compass is doing, the reality is that this space isn't, the Compass 2.0. It's not the same kind of space. It wouldn't be accessible in the same ways and function like the Compass does at Lakeshore Lofts. So we are looking for a great tenant. I've talked to somebody who said we need a convenience store. Somebody else said we really need a dog groomer. Mike Stevenson is our commercial leasing coordinator. He's here tonight. So if you have an idea, if you'd like to run a business in this space, talk to us, because we don't want to have empty commercial space. We want to have something in this space that's really useful to you, to us collectively as a neighborhood. So those are the things that we're working through when it comes to the site plan. The next, I think I already talked about that one there. The parking for this building is intended to be behind the building, so we're not putting the parking at the front. We want to have like a proper sort of street wall. We want to have the building itself be what you see that meets the zoning as well. we will be looking for a variance. We don't know exactly the number of parking spots that we can fit, but we know that the reality is the vast majority of our tenants don't have cars simply because of the cost of driving these days, and that we're right in front of a bus stop. So that's part of our reality, but we're working through that. And then the next slide, you can kind of see there is the current concept layout for apartments. We are focused primarily on single person or two person households, so the majority of units in this building will be one bedroom apartments using a layout which we've had a huge positive response to in past projects. So tenants love these apartments, the layout, and also having a strong focus on accessibility with barrier-free units, because we know those aren't generally not delivered by the private market, and the reality is a lot of our tenants do have mobility challenges. So making sure the accessibility is high. The next slide there, the project timeline. This is a question that we've had a lot of, like, how come this came up so fast and there was no consultation before now? In reality, we actually, Mississauga is a really hard place to find property for lots of reasons. It took us about 5 years to find our first site. Everybody has property, or everybody who has property always wants top dollar for it. That's fine, that's the market. And lots of folks have ideas of what they're going to do with their property. This particular site, as many of you know, has sat there vacant for quite some time. It's had the fence around it for a while. It was on the market and off the market and on the market. You know, like everybody else, we know realtors, and they're always looking for things. And one of our realtors called and said, I think I found the right place. This property meets this, you know, it's got the right planning permissions, it's got the right scale, it's got the accessibility, it's got the walkability, you know, all of the features that we look for in a project. And it had a willing seller, you know, somebody who was willing to actually sell their property. So that all came together. It was the end of October. Somebody asked, why did you buy it as a numbered company? We didn't buy it as a numbered company. We bought it as Indwell Community Homes from a numbered company. So the owner of the company, you know, they never like numbered companies. You don't identify yourself for lots of reasons, whatever they are. But we bought it from that company. I think they were probably just flippers because they'd bought it, and you know, that's real estate. But it closed at the end of November. And then, you know, because we do get funding, we do utilize funding from all levels of government. The federal government was looking for some sort of good news announcement, and of course, you know, as part of all of our contracts, it says that they can have an announcement on the site whenever they'd like. So there was a funding announcement / groundbreaking right there in early November. So in some respects, we were kind of like, well, wait a minute, we haven't even like talked about this yet for the community, but if the federal government calls, you answer. And that's just kind of how it is for us, for the region, well, it's just the way it is. So that's how that happened. But in terms of moving forward, because the planning permissions are generally in place, and like you said, we can move into site plan, which then informs minor variances, et cetera, we are able to actually move through quickly. And as I explained that this isn't our first project, a lot of what we've learned on past projects can be brought to bear very quickly. So in terms of like design, in terms of like the site plan, in terms of engineering, in terms of slope stabilization, all of these things are familiar to us in terms of the technical processes. And so we can move through them with a level of ambition that is reflective of the need. I know that if I was homeless, or if I was living in a situation that I couldn't afford, I would sure as heck hope that somebody who had some ability to help change my situation was doing their best. And given that I'm in a position to actually be that person on behalf of somebody else, me, my team, are working very hard to move through all of the sequence, all the steps in the process as quickly as possible for the sake of those who will live here. We also know that construction is like hell for everybody in terms of like the actual physical disruption it can create, and we want to keep that to as minimum time frame as possible. So those are all part of why we're shooting for a very ambitious development schedule and to get people living in this building as quickly as we can, probably sometime early 2025. I think that the last slide there, I already talked about the commercial spaces, but now it's time for the Q&A, and I'll basically pass it over to Ryan there, and that's the end of this part of the presentation. Yeah.
Thank you. So just invite some folks up to the stage while we get ready for our question and answer period. We're going to have some folks, some volunteers with microphones will be going around the room so you can ask your question. If you're in the room, put your hand up. We'd like to hear what your questions, your comments. We're going to try to hear from as many people as we can tonight. So we're probably going to hear from 2 to 3 people at a time before we start answering some questions. We want to start right here.
Hi, Karen Allen. Question for Parkdale staff, probably for Mr. Nevin. Question for Indwell staff, and this is about Parkdale and Hamilton. I've been reading a lot of information specifically about the murder in 2018. In November, a resident was murdered by a non-resident. According to Susan Claremont from the Hamilton Spectator, the court reporting, she said there were a lot of drug dealers going in and out of the building at all times. In July 2022, a resident also at your Parkdale Landing site was left to decompose for almost a week. According to Indwell, there were no policy violations, but Parkdale had a meal plan. It's unfathomable how they did not notice that this man was sleeping in his room for a week when he was left to decompose. Marvin Ross, he's considered an leading advocate for Canadian psychiatric impairment. His son was also a resident at Parkdale when the body was left to decompose. And Mr. Ross has stated that his son did not feel safe at Parkdale. If he had $5 in his pocket, he felt like he would be afraid of being jumped by other residents in the hall if he was going out for a smoke. In terms of police, I have numbers from Hamilton Spectator from September 1st, 2018 to February 24th. I'm getting to my question. To February 24th, 2022, the police were called to Parkdale Landing 1,261 times out of 1,272 days. Mr. Ross, he's a first-hand experience as an advocate and as having a son in your buildings. He says Indwell does a great job at transforming old buildings, but they fail at providing the support. I'd like to know what steps have you taken to change to provide support so that it's a safe building for the residents?
So I think that we should probably address this question first, but just as a show of hands, who else has a similar concern from Indwell? Yeah. So if we could talk a bit about that in...
Sure. So yeah, I'll say that. My name is Jeff Nevin. I'm the CEO of Indwell. I've been with Indwell first as a volunteer, and I've been on staff since 2001. Indwell's been around 50 years. You're right, there's 2 negative articles written on us in that time, both by the same reporter. It is a sad situation. Michael had recently moved into a new building, and his friend of a long time had an altercation with him and strangled him to death, which, as the reporter said, that's a murder. She's technically accurate. The community grieved that. And we grieve that. And that particular program has just talked about the different types of programs that we have. When we're moving folks from homelessness into an enhanced support program, which, as we've said today, this is the one that we're talking about today is about standard. If you're interested in another enhanced program, we can talk about that too, because there's definitely a lot of need. But when we're moving folks out into housing, we take people where they're at and we start working with people. Michael had been living with us, I think, about 6 weeks, and as we all know, transformation in life takes a long time. And I certainly haven't been able to transform my life in 6 weeks. Some of you have, I'm sure. But so we take that very, very seriously, and we grieve the fact that that incident happened. There's also a tension, just to get to your second point, about someone who had passed away and up and found. We're always in that tension of as Graham explained, we do independent apartments, and we're always bridging the tension between. We know that to become independent, you have to try independence, which means that we honor people's tenancy, meaning that we don't come in without notice. We don't come in, so we do schedule notice. And you mentioned that it's not within our it didn't violate our policy. Our typical policy is we do unit checks every 2 weeks in enhanced programs. And so we were on our schedule there. We also recognize people's independence in their unit. I don't know if that answers your question at all. No. I'll let.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Let's,
no, I can get to police calls. You know,
Yes.
because we've tracked that. We showed you that article from the London newspaper. When we housed 15 hard-to-house folks, police calls in the entire downtown of St. Thomas dropped by 85%. And so that's the stat we have on police calls. You can look up and see what the chief of police in St. Thomas has to say. You're welcome to talk to we have fantastic relationships with the Hamilton Police here in Peel as well. And we work alongside. And we're working with folks that are continuing to improve in their life. Yeah, no, that's what I was mentioning.
No, so hold on. We're here to have a conversation with everybody in the room. We need, in order to have a conversation where everybody can hear what you're saying, not just from where you're standing, but we have a room beside you as well. We need to make sure that we can go through the questions one at a time, and
so let me speak specifically to Hamilton. Hamilton has a wonderful program called Coast. We also have social navigators. They are a police department working with nurses. Social navigators are the paramedics that come alongside, and I'll give you an example of, in that program specifically, about 6 months ago, the whole community rallied together because someone had stopped, her entire life had been filled with self-harm. And she had experienced a year of no self-harm. So while she was self-harming, it's possible that, that paramedics would be called. What was very clear is how much the social navigators, through the paramedics, through the police program, and those calls are all registered as police responding, social navigators and such. How many people were involved in supporting this person to get to a spot where she's now a year and a half past self-harming since the last time she self-harmed. So those would all be in that statistic as well.
Sir,
We'll come back to that because I think there's other questions ahead of you, but there's lots of questions that are going to revolve around this, so let's come back to that one.
So we're going to go over there, and then we're going to go have one person from this room over here, please. Okay, so let's listen to the person over here, and then we'll add that to this question of what is being.
So maybe what might be helpful for Indwell to think about, because I have a question actually for our public representatives first, but maybe Indwell, could you think about, rather than specific examples in specific cities, what is the overall approach that you have to ensuring security in a building? Because you actually haven't demonstrated anything about that. And so specific to this site, what are you going to do? How do you work with security, private security, public security, in the community to ensure not just that you're protecting your residents, but you are protecting the interests of the community who already lives and thrives here? So that you could think about that in an overall approach would be helpful. My name's Laura. I've spoken to several people on the stage, as well as I understand we've got some representatives from Charles Sousa's office as well. There's been a lot of references to perhaps misinformation that is being circulated online. In fact, much of today's meeting has actually reinforced, I think, what most of the community is afraid about in terms of the types of individuals, but also services that are going to be introduced into Clarkson Village that we don't think have a place here with young families. I myself am a mother of 2 young children, and I know that all of you are aware of a growing petition online. It's only been active for a week. There's nearing 1,200 signatures, begging and urging our public representatives to please halt this and ensure that appropriate public consultation takes place. And so my question for Councillor Tejo, and again for anyone from Mr. Sousa's office, is what are you doing to represent the interests of those who elected you, to ensure that our community remains safe, and to ensure that, sure, this is a great site for Indwell, but how can you be assured, and what is the stakeholder assessment that's happening to ensure it's an appropriate site for Clarkson residents?
So thanks for the question, Laura. I think that the reality is that we're building apartment buildings that have people who are adults who are living there with many of the same needs and opportunities that the rest of us have, but whose lives have been impacted by a serious mental health issue or sometimes by an addiction. And the reality is that we know, and it's very, very clear, that mental health is still something that's highly stigmatized in our community. If you're a 54-year-old woman living with depression, you can no longer work full-time, and you need to put your life back together. What are your options when you're forced into homelessness? What are the issues?
Please.
So what happens when you're an athlete and you've had an injury and you start taking, So I guess I'm. So absolutely, we're 100% about protecting children because we actually also have children who live in our buildings. We are very concerned about the issue of children. So the issue is not just yet. Just give us a second for. I guess part of the challenge that we face is what are the answers that are satisfactory about where we should put supportive housing for people who are just like all of us. You look like our tenants in our buildings, and these are the kind of neighborhoods that many of us want to live in, who have been through these kinds of experiences of mental health and living well in the community. And so the reality is that our tenants are us. That is the reality. We're not talking about putting an enhanced program here where we have like very active drug use, where we have very active issues of street homelessness, etc. We're not talking about putting that kind of building here. I know there's a lot of skepticism about that and about whether we're being truthful about that, but that is our reality.
So, okay. We have other questions in this room as well. I'll go to you next, sir. Please, from this room over here, please.
Hi there.
So let's, we're trying to get to as many people as possible.
Hi there, my name is Chantal and I have a question with respect to refugees. I'm wondering if any of your units are allotted to refugees or if those individuals are taken into consideration within your other programs.
Yes, is the answer. I mean, yes, in that refugees and newcomers are taken into account, particularly because that's a population that's often needing affordability and looking for support, wanting to be part of a healthy community. So yes, newcomers and refugees are included in who may need to or want to live in an Indwell building. There's nothing allotted yet. It's still early days on, is there a specific number of units or do we have a particular partnership? That's still to come. And if you have a partnership or a suggestion, please do reach out to myself or to Trish DeSimone, our community engagement manager, so we can talk a bit about that. Because it is a part of the population who could be supported in an Indwell building like this.
Thank
Absolutely.
You.
Thank you.
Part B to that question, if you can speak more to the criteria for the standard program, then I think that's where is leaving a lot of gray areas.
Yeah, there is a lot of gray area. So the criteria for a standard support program generally includes about a year of established stability within housing. There needs to be a, I actually have it on a paper, which is not here. So it's an established at least a year of housing stability and ability to articulate your own needs and to be able to connect with supports, to attend appointments, perhaps I really need my piece of paper. Medication stability. So people need to be managing their own medications. It's not something that our housing support staff are working with. The people are doing that on their own, although they can check in. Also be able to make their own meals. And if somebody can't make their own meals, because we often have seniors, right? Our population tips towards seniors, often seniors who are looking to age in place. So participating in a Meals on Wheels program or Heart to Home, that's actually quite common for our tenants. But we don't have a meal program in a building like this. Sometimes there's potlucks and those kinds of things, but not a meal program. People have their own furnishings, so perhaps they're coming from owning their own place or downsizing. And quite often, there's a number of barrier-free units. So it's people who have established mobility needs. For instance, perhaps they're aging in their home, but their home has stairs. And so they may need a scooter or a wheelchair. And so there are specific units that are set aside so that folks who have mobility needs can have those met in the building.
This gentleman has had his... So, we can't hear...
Teresa, I think the man over there has been there longer.
Be safe. I am not safe in Dwell place. I thank you for your jobs. And I appreciated you individually and everybody that does their best. However, my life, I'm not speaking about nobody else's, my life has been in danger over and over and over. Jessica, I send you pictures, I send you letters. I ask you, Peter, to give me a peaceful place where I can call home and lay my head. Instead, I have been pushed, threatened. I've ran away from a 46 years of marriage of an alcoholic abuse to be in a place where I want to be at rest, but I am not, because in front of my apartment, all I see is drug dealers, drug addicts, alcoholics. I cannot open my window. I'm not allowed to open my window because I can hear every single thing that is going on. The only thing that I would love to have is the answer. When are you guys going to take 1 second of your time and look after the tenants that really need to be looked after? You guys are very good at looking after the drug dealers, the drug addicts, and the alcoholics. I might lose my place. Just a minute. I might lose my place that I call home at Indwell because of my outspoken words. But I'm not speaking just for myself. This lady here, this lady, that lady, and much more. This young man here. And there's more. We don't want you to think that we are forgotten, because I feel like I have been forgotten. When I spoke with Jessica, she said to me she was going to look after that. However, it has been many, many months. In one of the emails that I sent to Jessica, to my social worker, and the person from SHIP, the answer was this. Not these words, but practically, deal with it. If you have an issue, call the police. Since when I'm supposed to call the police? Am I in charge of the rest of the people that live there? I understand that we all have limits, and I have my limits because I cannot go out of my apartment without knowing if somebody is going to stab me on the back. And I don't want to live in fear, and I do. I have not lost my mind, but I have lost my privacy and my dignity when I go out and I knock at the door of the office. The answer is not expected to be, oh, they're just vaping. Come on, be realistic. These people are not vaping. They are doing drugs. They are buying drugs in front of the foyer. People that's not supposed to live there. I live in like 2-3 people in one apartment with dogs. They're furious.
So I'm happy to respond. I'm happy to respond to you, ma'am. So
I just want
can I respond?
Sure.
Can I respond to you, ma'am? Can I respond, ma'am?
Just let me say this. All I'm looking for is a place where I can call home and safe, not something that I have to look all over the place with my key, just in case somebody comes and attacks me. Come on, is this a living? If this is a living, I want to make sure that you know how I feel.
Can I respond?
Sure,
Yeah.
why not? Listen, I do appreciate you, and I appreciate all the Indwell. Okay, I do appreciate you guys are trying to do something good for the community. I like that. I'm a volunteer. I do all kinds of volunteers. I know you guys are doing well, but you are missing one thing. You are mixing people like us with drug dealers, drug addicts, and alcoholics.
So thank you. And you and I spoke about a month and a half ago about your concerns, and I hear you articulating them again today, that the primary concern I hear from you is the folks in front of your window, outside of the community, getting into the building. And that is a reality that we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, that we have 4,500 people in our community that are looking for supportive housing. And And part of the challenge is a lot of folks are coming to look for help and looking for services that the good people at the Compass are offering, and we're really thankful for them, but it does add complexities. So I wonder even if this building is a better fit for you, because this one's standard support and not the other one. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're coming. So first, I want to thank that lady, because I think that actually drives home a lot of our points. But what I will call out is that given the vocality of this neighborhood when this announcement came out, and all of the questions and all of the concerns that were lobbied into your office and on social media, I think respectfully, you started this whole presentation off very tone deaf to the concerns and, quite honestly, to this neighborhood. We have 2 shelters in this neighborhood that every single person in this room and in this neighborhood wraps their arms around and finds a way to support and help out. So, right? Thank you. So you want to talk about a giving and a connected community. This is a giving and connected community. So I think, A, you need to recognize that, but you also need to recognize this is a very family-centric neighborhood. And so I look at this woman and I hear her story, and that I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for you that you got let down in that sense. There are genuine people like her that need that leg up. There are women in the shelters in this neighborhood today whose children attend our schools as ghost children, who, when they are ready to move on to the next step in independent life, have to uproot their children again from a community-safe environment that has surrounded them and befriended them and go and live somewhere else. So why can't we take something like this and provide them a leg up? It's still addressing the same homeless scenario. It's still addressing people in need, but it's also satisfying another itch, which is these families, these women with children who have literally left in the middle of the night to escape abuse and some horrific situations, an area where they can provide some stability in a neighborhood where they feel safe. And Alvin, you and Chuck need to do better.
I will add to her point. I live right behind Arma House, a home for battered women. And the community has supported them like unbelievable. And because these people are needy, they cause no problems. And so I applaud you in your suggestion. It was wonderful. Now, I want to give a little background because this is going to give you to the story. For over 10 years, I volunteered at the Good Shepherd, Queen Street East, working with homeless, working with drug-addicted people, working with mentally ill people. And then it got to the point when I would drive across the city at 7 o'clock in the morning, all I saw were red taillights. So I then, for the last 7 years, have been volunteering at a similar place in South Etobicoke. So I have been in the trenches for 17 years, working with the homeless, the drug addicted, mentally ill, the schizophrenics, constantly. More time than probably the entire committee up there. So I want to tell you what I see and what I've seen. What concerns me most is this, that particularly from April to November, these people do not stay in their rooms. They want to be out in the community. They want to walk around. And I see it. I mean, it's part of it. And so they're walking around the community. And these other shelters are in a location which is acceptable to it. My big problem here is this. You are bringing in drug-addicted people with drug problems, mental illness, all these things. And people living there are going to walk out in the community. It will affect the businesses, but I'm not concerned about the businesses. What I am concerned about is this. There is a park, Birchwood Park, which is a 5-minute walk from this place. And I can assure you that 100% the residents there will spend a lot of time in Birchwood Park. Now, Birchwood Park, during the summer days, children are playing there all the time. All the time. In the evenings, there's slow pitch games, there's soccer games going on. Parents drop their children off at this park, which is 5 minutes from this house that you're planning there. This is going to be a disaster, because all it would take is one child to be injured or affected in any way, and this home is responsible for it. You cannot build a place like this where children spend all day and evenings by themselves, innocent children, and expect these people that you're going to have in there. And I hear all these problems that I'm hearing. This woman here, the drug addicts in front of her place, well, they're going to be in the park. It's going to be a disaster. I like your idea over there, a home for battered women. It would be marvelous. But the clientele that you want to hit right now is going to cause a massive problem.
Can I speak to that? Can I? Sorry. So I'm a mom. I have 3 kids, and I live within a kilometer of 2 Indwell buildings. Yeah. And we do everything in the neighborhood. This isn't about me, though. This is about your community. Indwell actually does housing for families as well. It's part of what we do. We do housing for aging seniors. So when we talk about a standard support program, and when we work with SHIP, right, supportive housing in Peel, we're looking at folks who can be matched for what we need. So what they need and what we offer, it's possible for us to match that. And so it's possible for us to actually look through the criteria, to establish that criteria, to listen to you here and say, you know what, that's part of Indwell's model too, just the same things you're talking about. We don't want people to have to move from their community. That is the last thing anybody wants, for kids to be ripped from their community because they're in transitional or temporary housing. We do permanent housing. And so if there's opportunities here, if we can work with this, if this is an established need in the community, yeah, we're gonna take that back. That's gonna form how we proceed. I don't know what we can do because I'm not the one who's on the government checking the boxes of the funding side of things, but we're in the middle of developing 2 and 3 bedroom housing. We have lots of families who live with Indwell. Yes, primarily our enhanced support programs, those are bachelor and 1 bedroom. But this is a different environment. This is a different kind of Indwell building, and we have done that before. Is it something that we could do here? Well, it's good to hear this tonight. So thank you for those insights into what you're seeing in your community that can help to form what's next.
So we have a question. Can we also get somebody over here? But I think we need to get over here as well, please. And then we also have this room as well.
Hi, so I'm an Indwell tenant. I live down the street. And I think what everybody wants to know is, are you going to house addicts? Because I personally have been affected by it. I've been assaulted verbally, physically from Compass users, from tenants in the building. And honestly, the biggest issue is the people who come in with addiction problems. The people from Streetsville don't cause any problems. They're great. And out of the 68 units in our building, there's probably under 10 units that are the troublemakers. And of those units, every troublemaker is either excessively drinking, doing drugs, or letting the people from the encampment outside basically come in and live with them illegally because they help pay their rent, so they have more money for drugs and alcohol and whatever. So I think that everybody just wants to know that you're not letting more addicts and more alcoholics here, because I personally don't like where I live, and many of us feel the same because we don't feel safe. Like, and it's not the whole building. There's 10 or less people, like 10 or less units that cause the problems. But our whole building has a reputation for being the problem makers now, but it's not. Compass users, and I'm not saying all of them, because there's a lot of families that use Compass and they need it, but with the drug addicts and the alcoholics, they befriend other users, and then when the weather starts to get cold, they're like, hey, just come couch surf at my place. And so we have addicts and people who don't live there constantly coming in and out of our building because they're given fobs, they're given keys, our building is supposed to be no smoking. These people are smoking in the units. I have a severe respiratory illness as well as other neighbors. I literally cannot leave my apartment without my inhaler because I can't breathe once I hit the hallway. I can't open my windows because these people think that it's okay to party all day outside at the smoke shack. And if you're in the front of the building and you open your window, you get to inhale all the cigarette smoke from the people standing out front smoking. They use the building as a urinal. It really is. If the addicts, like you can have, like a lot of people in the building have mental illness, depression, whatever. Those people don't really cause the issues, but as soon as you add alcohol and drugs into the mix, especially with mental illness, those are the tenants that are causing all the problems. And we know the tenants that are causing the problems. And I know a lot of them are going through eviction and stuff, and it's a long process, but there has to be a way to get these dangerous people out of the building so that the rest of us can feel safe. I literally have to go to court multiple times against some of these tenants. I've had to press charges on them myself because not even the police want to deal with this anymore. They don't care. I've been assaulted and verbally, physically multiple times. I don't even want to unpack. I haven't even fully unpacked because, in all honesty, if you ask me, I hate living there because my floor is the worst out of all the floors. And it's these select people who think it's okay to smoke in the building and smoke crack or whatever the hell they do, and they think it's okay to assault people. And that's the thing. Like, how many community meetings have we had where the tenants, the number one thing is we need security, we need security, we need security. And in the beginning, we had security at night when the staff went home. So we had security at night once staff went home for the first little while. And then they took away security, and then problems started. That's when people started sneaking to the building. That's when people started moving drug addicts and dealers into the building. Because they give the person who actually lives their money, and then they have more money to spend on crack. But right now we have security for 4 hours a night. These people know. I've literally had my neighbor in the last week who's a psychopath try to get into my apartment like 6 times. 6 times, once at 3:20 p.m., at 3 something in the morning, at 4 something in the morning. It's the people with allowed into these places.
I think you've hit the nail on the head for a lot of us. We would actually agree with, we agree with all of what you've just said. And I think this issue of security and overnight security is one which we heard from our neighbors at the Craftsman. You know, they've got a concierge. We're looking at having the same kind of option at this building because this is the reality of honestly, in many of our buildings, we don't deal with this kind of level of insecurity. And so it's curious to us that we would be having the conversation about overnight security like this in these kinds of buildings here. So, yeah. So we need to, let's have a conversation. We'll come and deal with the issues specifically that you're raising about your building, because these are real issues we want to deal with too. Everybody knows the Landlord and Tenant Board's a dysfunctional organization, so we've got to get past that. So I think that the key part of what we're talking about for this building is that it's not replicating Lakeshore Lofts programmatically. It's a different program that is focused on the kind of secure and safety that you're looking for. And we're talking about this issue, well, because like we're talking about the issue of attentiveness around the way that the Lakeshore Lofts program was originally designed was like 4 or 5 years ago. The issues of the opioid crisis, the issues of who's on the waiting list for supportive housing continue to change, as we all know. And this is the part of the challenge is when we say yes to somebody to move into a new building, when we offer sort of that opportunity to restart a life, you don't know 100% how that's going to work. And you mentioned there's about 10 people who cause most of the problem. Anybody here a landlord? Anybody tried to use the Landlord and Tenant Board recently? Completely dysfunctional. This is part of the problem, is that the systems we have set up as a society, but this is the problem. So don't let them in. You won't have to kick them out. Totally understand that. And the reality is that not everybody who presents their situation presents it accurately, and sometimes you end up with a situation where a tenant moves in that is not suited. And so how do we move forward from there? So this idea of security overnight, of course, it's on our radar, and we're going to look at that and how to 24/7. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Trish. And then after this question, there's some people in
Yeah,
there
it would be
waiting as
good
well.
when people are talking, if they could be more concise. It is now 8 o'clock, and not many people have had a chance to speak because people are very verbose. It's frustrating to hear about the stigma about how all these people have drug problems and mental health problems. Where is this coming from? And I think it's because they hear about a few people, and that's it. Not everyone has a problem. You're not listening to me. The other thing is, in the newspaper, there's been 2 articles. 2 articles. How many years have you been in operation? How many units do you have? That doesn't sound like a lot to me. I think we need to think about that, because that will help put things in perspective. And how many units do you have? 2 articles in that history, I think, will be pretty small.
It's 50 years, and we have 1,200 units.
So you've had 2 articles in 50 years. That's pretty good.
So I appreciate that our tenants are here tonight, and yeah, that is really good, because it talks about engagement, and I've had conversations with some of the speakers, not all the speakers personally. We have staff on site that are available tomorrow, tonight, 24-hour on call, should we want to have those conversations further. And so I welcome the voices that are here, and they're welcome to share their voices as we co-create a community as well, and try to figure out how we can create places of belonging for everybody.
So, yes, please.
Opportunity. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk tonight. I do think the project's a good idea. Our family does donate significantly to Compass. I have personally delivered food to Arma House. But the people here tonight do have valid concerns, and I want to bring up very quickly, because I have provided for a number of years affordable housing in the GTA, and unfortunately, I'm actually fairly competent with the Residential Tenancy Act. Is Indwell governed by the Residential Tenancy Act? Then you know or ought to know that you're not going to be able to stop visitors from entering. That will be a violation of the Residential Tenancy Act, and your tenant could sue you. So having security at the front desk does not matter. All the visitor has to say is, I've been invited in, and there's nothing you can do. And it gets better. That tenant that you've got living in there is allowed to bring anybody in that they want, and they can live there long term. And there's nothing you can do. That person coming in does not even have to tell you their name. And you cannot increase the rent. You're not allowed to. So, well, if you're governed by the Residential Tenancy Act, it is true. Well, okay, let you talk for a long time. Let me finish. So you're not going to stop people coming in because under the Residential Tenancy Act, which you've said you're governed by, they're allowed to bring in visitors. There's nothing you can do about that. They're allowed to come in. But Graham, you've been quoted or you've been paraphrased in the Hamilton Spectator as saying that you'd never build another Parkdale Landing building. And I don't blame you because honestly frankly, there wasn't one death in the building between 2018 and 2022. There was 7. 1 murder, 2 suicides, 2 overdoses, 1 natural cause, and 1 undetermined, but likely an overdose, quote unquote, from the Hamilton Spectator. I don't blame you for not wanting to build another one like that. But you also say that sometimes tenants have dangerously misplaced intentions. And good for you for realizing that, but knowing that you also have to act accordingly. And your program supervisor, Zachary Rowley, says that the #1 struggle is guests and guest management. You're not going to be able to keep guests out. If you're under the Residential Tenancy Act, you can make all the promises you want, you can have all the security you want, but you'll be in violation, and that tenant can call legal aid and you will get sued. So I don't understand, how is this building that you want to build now any different than the Parkdale Landing one? The Parkdale Landing had 57 units. This one has 50. Both have emotionally challenged occupants. Both have drug addicts. Now, you've said that this building is a standard building, but by your own graph tonight, your own chart, the standard building includes those with addictions, requiring behavioral therapy, and have those with psychological problems. Your own chart says that they're included in the standard housing. In addition, as we've said, you're not going to be able to control visitors. I tried. It was a big problem in my building. And you're still dealing with, as you've said, tenants who have dangerously misplaced intentions. So what are you actually going to do? And just a cautionary, refusal to answer the question is your answer. So, I'm sorry, one last thing. If any of these people here have any retaliation against them, they will have my phone number before they leave, and they're welcome to call me. And I hope the rest of you step up as well.
So thank you for your comments and question, and I appreciate that we're getting into some of the complexities of being a landlord, the complexities of being a supportive landlord. I will point out, just as we mentioned before, you're referring to the same 2 articles about one particular program, the Parkdale program. We have over 25 plus programs and 1,200 units. So I get that. The difference is, you said, what are we going to do? The intake process is different for this building. And so we mentioned, and my colleague Jess mentioned, we're looking for people that are have achieved housing stability for more than a year. You heard my colleague say that. That's an answer. And so we're working with folks who are on that trajectory towards further independence. And we're seeing this in every one of our programs. Even that Parkdale program that particular lens sees as a failure, it's a huge success. The amount of people that come into that program and move on to further independence, in the first 2 years, I think it was about 20% move to further independence. Now, some would say that's a failure because why didn't everybody transform their life completely in that 2 years? And that's the reality, the complexity of us. And if you look at this room, I bet you there's not a person here who doesn't have a member in their family who's dealing with mental health. I know I do. And the stats say that 1 in 4 of us will have a mental illness in our life. So what we're describing is, yes, we're not lying to you. We're telling you exactly who we're housing, why we're housing it, what the values are behind it, that we have a support team behind us that's engaged, connected, and is working to create a beautiful communities where people can express disagreement, disappointment, and it's working.
So we're going to go 1, 2, and then 3 over here.
Hi, my name is Bertie. Just want to add to what the gentleman said. This is more for the city and for the councilors. The question is going to be, all these things we understand all the risk and everything else, right? They're going to, even though they're standard and they've been okay for a year, you never know if they're going to relapse or not. Number 2, they're going to have friends that are going to come over. This building is 50 units, and looking at the project itself, you're going to be looking at a variance, and and also just looking at the one at Port Credit, there's a lot of people that are outside in the back. I go to the gym near there, and you can see a lot of people outside and doing stuff. So my question to the city is this the overdevelopment? Is 50 unit the right amount of units for this property? I think, and going back to what other people said around security, I think it's important. There's a lot of kids in this neighborhood. What are the things that the city's gonna do to make sure that our kids are safe? Those are my 2 questions.
Thank you for that question. I haven't been speaking tonight because this is your meeting and Indwell's meeting to clarify some things, but this was addressed directly to me. So I'm happy to answer. I'm happy to. Sorry, Sorry, thank you. I wanted to facilitate this meeting so we have an opportunity to have a conversation. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that, but I understand. Give me a second to answer the question. So I think there's a couple of things to talk about because this one was addressed to me directly, and I just wanted to say that this was a meeting that we were trying to facilitate between the developer and people. That's what I wanted to say, first of all. I also want to acknowledge the concerns that the community has raised. I've talked to many of you on the phone. I've seen a lot of your emails and responded to a number of them. I acknowledge your fear and your concerns. I understand. This is my community too. I do have 3 young children. We are at Birchwood every couple of days in the summer, right? We go to Dairy Queen all the time. I understand your fear and your concern. I want to acknowledge that. I know that this is a challenge and you're worried about it. I do also want to talk about how this project, right, and how it moves forward in terms of the city's view to the question in terms of process, right? I think Hugh was mentioning how this process came to be to this point, right? Is it appropriate? That is the question that you asked in terms of 50 units, right? We do not zone for people. That is not anything that the city is allowed to do. We can design areas for purpose, right? So the purpose of the Clarkson Village is mixed use, residential and commercial. That's why this application came in, and there was not a preliminary community consultation. So I want to be clear on that. That's also why there is not a vote later on at Planning and Development Committee or City Council. This is not a development application that needs to be approved by City Council by vote or not. So the zoning is for mixed use. The additional land, the additional space that they may be asking for will go to the Committee of Adjustment because I believe it is minor in nature. Now, that is up to our professional planning staff to decide what is minor and what is not, and it's up to the applicant to do that. We are going through that process. That process is not obviously complete. There is going to be site plan work. There's potentially also going to be a Committee of Adjustment opportunity. At that time, you do have another opportunity to come in and provide feedback to the building structure. But I do want to say a couple of things around the zoning that we are talking about, right? Because I think one of the things that some people weren't clear of at the beginning is that, yes, they're a charity and they're not for profit, but it is a business model where they have to move forward and purchase land, right? The same way that when Tim Hortons switched to Popeyes, it was not a public conversation that we had. They have their own opportunities to buy those lands and develop those lands. So, let me finish, please. There is an opportunity, obviously, and this is the one we're taking right now, but we can't zone the type of people that live in certain housing, right? We zone for residential use or mixed use or commercial use. It is up to the owner, the property owner, the developer, to decide who they want to lease or rent out to, right? That is not a city responsibility, nor is it appropriate for the city to determine who can and cannot live in certain neighborhoods. This actually used to be quite a problem with suburbs years ago when we tried to test for income, or they created areas that for certain races only. We want only to appropriately zone spaces for their use. This is zoned for mixed use, which means residential and commercial. I do also need to say, because I have spoken to a lot of people who are concerned about this, and I acknowledge that. And some of the people who do support the program, and I think have concerns around the narrative that people who are in need of housing or people who have mental health issues are inherently criminals. I don't believe that to be true. I think it's an opportunity for them to get on their feet. And I want to be a city that can be acknowledging that you have those concerns while at the same time trying to address them and take care of them. Now, there were safety issues that you raised, and I think, so I spoke to Bonnie today. We talked about this in council today because I said there's going to be several hundred people living here at the meeting today. And Bonnie lives across from the other Indwell site, and she wanted to echo her support for the site. She, not just her, but also the other orders of government, Rudy Cazzetto has also talked about the support from the provincial government as well as from the federal government. But the safety concerns, certainly this is something that we're all concerned about. We live in one of the safest neighborhoods. We had a safety meeting last week, which a number of you attended, and we had the superintendent come down. And yes, there are many concerns right now around car thefts and break-ins, and we are addressing that. We're trying to respond to that. The police asked for a significant increase. We're actually doubling the number of police officers that we hired. This is the most police officers we'll hire in the history of Peel Region, and 135 plus 90 civilians in order to help with 911 and to make sure that we're being responsive. The superintendent, he couldn't be here tonight, but he was talking about his commitment to ensuring that this remains one of the safest neighborhoods in Mississauga, in Peel, and in all of Canada. And he's committed to that, and I support him with that. So I, again, acknowledge your concerns, and I hope that we can continue to have a productive conversation today. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Brian Thorburn. I live in Clarkson. I've lived here since 2008. I struggle to pay for a house that was expensive. I put every cent that I have into my home. I am appalled that this building is going in. I have zero support for it. Thank you. I've raised my family here in a safe neighborhood. I can't understand how you guys paid $5 million for that lot. Who gave you the money? Was it given by the federal government? Was it given by the provincial government? Was it given by the City of Mississauga? It's our money. If Alvin, if this is part of you, I tell you, I swear I will do everything to stop this project. Whatever way I can do it, I will. And I can guarantee you, your vote, your popularity is probably on the floor right now. If this does not, if this project goes off, you will never, ever have any aspirations of getting elected again. This is ludicrous. There's a school across the street. There is a cannabis store across the street. There's a liquor store down the street. And for $5 million, if you guys flip the lot, you could go somewhere else, buy a cheaper lot, and put up 100 units in a better situated area. The money doesn't make sense to build a building there. It's too small of a lot. You're gonna take up Lakeshore, you're gonna stop the traffic, it's gonna be a friggin' nightmare. And the children, well, the children are right there, right in front, right behind, right on the side. Dairy Queen has lineups in the summer. And there's gonna be people getting ice cream, and the smell from the dope is gonna be incredible. I think this is pathetic, it is the wrong spot. You cannot go through with this. Cannot. Alvin, I want your support to stop this. Will you stop this? Will you stop this? That's my question.
Brian, so there is a process that they're going through, right? There is not a vote. This is not a project that I have the power or capacity to stop, right? I'm sorry. Do you want to answer the $5 million?
So that's a good question. Where does charities get their money? So on any given year, any given year, about 20% of our operating comes from people like us in this room. On a typical project, we run a capital campaign, donor campaign. In this particular one, it's the federal rapid housing initiative money that we've been able to tap into. I really like the idea of Mississauga putting more money into supporting affordable housing. So that's something that we'll work on, but I don't think there's a lot of local money. It's primarily a rapid housing initiative that we've been able to tap into for this.
So there is no city funding. There's no city funding for this project.
So the reality is, I don't know where you're getting the number of $5 million from, but it's because it was 3.445 million. So I don't understand where some of these facts are coming from. But I think that underlying, I mean, the reality is that if we said we were putting up luxury rental housing, how many people would have a problem? Exactly. So this is where we're all taxpayers. We're all taxpayers, and so I think the reality is that. So the reality is that taxpayers, we're all taxpayers, and we can all participate in the planning process. The reality is that this property has to go through this particular planning process, which is the zoning for this property is highly conducive to the project that's being developed as high quality rental housing. The tenants who are here, bravo to you for coming and thank you. And to your point about retribution, there's no retribution for complaining. There absolutely won't be. And I think that the reality is that when we hear these are, so the reality is that you know, there's Airbnbs, condo buildings, everybody has this problem of negligent tenants, and we know that that's real, and we're constantly trying to deal with it in a way that acknowledges people's complexity and holds out the responsibility that tenants have to meet our standards of behavior.
Just to jump on that, to speak about some of the concerns around, and what's the difference with supportive housing and what Indwell is proposing here. Because right now, Indwell has one building in this region, one building that has to do all of the things. And we're located where we are. We have folks who are without housing coming in close proximity to us, accessing the compass. When we have Streetsville operating and when we have Clarkson operating, we've got more options so that someone who needs support for their addiction can actually move to a place where they would be able to get that support. We've got more options because you're right, we're bound by the landlord-tenant board system. When we can have a few more options, we can actually help to streamline a person who's seeking support toward that support. There's more options for people. We can't force anyone to do that, we know that. It's actually all based on relationship as it would be anywhere. We can talk further because we work out we do work on subsidized rent, but if you've got a different idea on here, we're actually working out occupancy agreements for our enhanced support program. So our occupancy agreements are actually the opportunity to move out from the Residential Tenancies Act system so that we can actually work with people providing them support, and if they're and that actually sort of commits that supportive relationship in a way that the Residential Tenancies Act can't. That's a process that that Indwell is adopting. That's not in operation at Lakeshore Lofts, but that's the movement that we're headed toward in order to be able to, to meet some of those needs in that way. So that's just what I would say to that.
Can I build on that a little bit, though? I think Roshana talked about the need for 4,500 more supportive housing apartments. You can't solve the region's problem for lack of supportive housing with one project. And this is, I think, to your point as tenants, you'd rather live in a building that's more like this one, actually, that isn't right beside the compass, that doesn't have some of these same pressures. We need 80 buildings the size of this one in order to meet the needs of that waiting list. So part of this is our collective responsibility as a community. We need 80 projects that have 50 units. Where are we going to put them? In Mississauga, in Peel Region, 80, because we're all saying it shouldn't be here, but it should be somewhere else. We need 80 of them. So this is the challenge that this is the challenge that we all have, is where are we going to put the housing that we need for our loved ones, for our women who are leaving domestic violence, who are leaving the situations of precarity, because we have to build housing. We have to build more supportive housing, and it can't all go somewhere else. It has to go somewhere. So this is part of the challenge. You're experiencing the same dilemma we have, and we share the pain with you.
I just wanted to just take note here as I'm listening. There's a real mixed stew going on here, and I think we're sort of talking around an issue here. And I think ultimately, as I'm listening to everybody else, there's one huge concern, and it's the clientele that you're going to be housing in this particular unit. Statistically, how many will be either alcoholics or addicts or whatever? And then when you bring in the idea of bringing in a parent or a mother, let's say, with a child in there, I'm not sure that's a facility that I would want, you know, a family getting into. You've also addressed the fact that we've also probably experienced, all of us personally to some degree, either a mental illness, a drug addiction, whatever. I can speak personally, just very generally, but personally, that one person will never be allowed in any of our homes for very obvious reasons. Thievery. I mean, it's just, it goes on and on and on. No matter the help, no matter what you offer this person. I think too, as I'm listening, you say, for example, the chap second in here, when you said that there was a room check every 2 weeks. Well, a lot can happen in 2 weeks. So, you know, we're touching on a lot of things here that you're not really making us feel comfortable about. There's not a clean picture here. I don't even know what the percentage is of people that will have mental illnesses or addiction issues. It strikes me more and more and more that this will be the people that you will be housing, and rightly so. But I think our area, it's very gentrified. You've got huge family presence here. You've got a school, you've got a daycare, you've got parks, you've got toboggan hills, you've got the Dairy Queen where kids congregate constantly. I mean, this is you've got Halloween, you know, Clarkson Halloween events. You've got a lot of stuff happening here. I'm not getting a sense that you have a real handle on what may or may not come out of this and how it's going to initially affect our community. And just one last question. I thought I heard earlier you said 68 units. You've been saying 50, but somebody said I thought 68.
At our other location.
At the
Lakeshore,
other
yeah.
location, okay. All right. Anyway, and that's it.
Yeah.
I will end it. I'm not going to be too long-winded here. I think that's what I'm hearing here. There's just a real mudding of the waters. I think people here are smart enough to know what needs to be dealt with here, and I think they want clean answers. They don't want this little walk around that
Absolutely.
we feel we're getting.
Yeah. So if you read the article by Susan Claremont, this is 100% not that program. So that's where the muddying of the waters keeps coming back. We keep referring to Parkdale Landing, we keep referring to Susan Claremont, who single-handedly has done more to stigmatize mental health and people who believe in their own recovery than any other reporter we've ever talked to, and who abused 2 hours of unrestricted access and full disclosure of every part of that program that we gave her a walking tour through. So, when you talk about sort of, never mind, I won't go on about that. But the reality is we're not talking about an enhanced support program which has the 2-week routine checks, which has all of these things, which takes people directly out of encampments or out of jail or directly out of emergency shelter. This project at 1639 Clarkson is a standard support program, as Jessica talked about, is people who have established track records of mental stability, with medications that are working, with psychiatrists that they see regularly, with all of these things. So that's fine. It's very clear that there's a lot of confusion about how one recovers from mental illness. And being able to see a psychiatrist regularly, being able to have a family doctor, be able to sort of work through a regime of medication that works for you or get changes when it stops working for you. These are key things that it takes to live well with a serious mental illness, which many of our tenants do have. We're not going to shy away from saying that. It might be 80% of our tenants in a standard support building live with a mental illness. I'm not saying 80% have schizophrenia, but in terms of addicts, 20% of Canadians have an addiction to alcohol. So that probably is reflective of our building. So I'm just saying that this is the reality that we experience, is that as Canadians, none of us are immune from addiction. And so our tenants in a standard support building would reflect general Canadian society when it comes to addiction. In terms of safety, in terms of how we deal with those addictions, in terms of how we deal with community standards within the building, this is where we have a strong stance and a low tolerance for those kinds of predatory dealers, of squatters, of people coming and going. And so, but we're talking about, as Jess said, Lakeshore Lofts is our only building in Mississauga. We're trying to do numerous things under a lot of sort of competing demands for what's happening at Lakeshore Lofts, and that's why we need more than one program where we can actually move tenants like yourselves who might want to move out of that environment into an environment like this. And so this is part of the challenge, is that we have to create more environments where we have more nuancing of program models, because we can prove that that works based on all of our experience. We had a number of folks come over from the Craftsman to Hamilton last week. Again, unrestricted access to come through, talk to tenants, meet people, discuss program models, see physical spaces, walk through the building, understand how the program works, meet staff. This is how we describe what it is we do and how it works. And in practical terms, 1 writer, 2 articles, these are the kind of things that sort of tar the whole sort of anybody who's seeking supportive housing with the same brush.
So I think one of the challenges, we're trying to be transparent, and we're trying to tell you that we're actually going to house people that have complex, have mental health, and some who have substance use as well, and we recognize that both of those are on a continuum. chances are there's few of us that have perfect mental health. Chances of us is that there's few of us that have complete mental illness. And we're all on a spectrum there. So you want me to...
It's obvious that there's not really an ability to have a conversation around these issues, because when you yell out that we're being disrespectful by saying that we have mental illnesses. So, even today, you've heard Jeff say that he's talked to one of our tenants. Even today, I'm getting an email from a tenant in London saying, that's fine. So, I mean, my cell phone is on most of our job board signs. You know, it's on our business cards. In practical terms, the answers, the reason we're not able to give a one-size-fits-all answer is because one-size-fits-all answers aren't applicable. And so when we talk about...
I live in a neighborhood, my wife and I have 4 kids, and we live in a neighborhood that has 250 of our units. So I can just speak from my experience, and I encourage you to engage with, city councilors that are in ridings that we've been in, and talk to them. Come and see. I can share with you that I don't hide the fact where I live. One of our tenants delivers flyers to my house. Others, when they go for a walk to the park, and that's a really great thing, by the way, to go for a walk to the park. I see that some folks have dogs here. It's really therapeutic to take your dog to the park. And when they walk by my house, they say hello. And so I've integrated my life into the life of our tenants where I live, and it's been incredible blessing to our family. I'll give you an example. In June, when my parents couldn't make it to my kid's grade 8 graduation, and we said, who would you like since your grandparents can't make it? She chose one of our tenants to be a substitute grandma to fill in. And that's the kind of level, so, am I having a hard time understanding your question? Yeah, I am, because it's outside of my experience. So ask me the question. So what is your question? Help me. What is the question?
Fundamentally, we don't endorse addiction as a healthy choice. I think that this is the challenge we have. How one overcomes addiction is individual, and we will try to put around each of our tenants the supports that they need to overcome addiction. An opioid addiction is different than an alcohol addiction, which is different than dealing with marijuana, which is different than dealing with prescription drugs. Each of those has a different response, and it is complicated for each tenant. Some tenants want to choose recovery, and we absolutely endorse that and make every effort to help them. Other tenants are not at that point, and some actively choose not to bother with recovery. It's very difficult as a landlord to deal with tenants who choose that route, and we go down the path of the landlord-tenant board and all of those mechanisms. We don't, and I can appreciate your situation because I lived in the same situation in one of Indwell's buildings when I was a tenant in one of them. When our tenant who had an addiction but was trying to overcome it, got a boyfriend who was more of a drug dealer than a boyfriend, it's very difficult to try to tell them you can't have this person as your boyfriend when they claim it's a legitimate relationship, when it's dead obvious that it's actually an exploitive relationship. It took a number of months and disruption to me personally.
I live in Clarkson. I've lived here since 2008. I struggle to pay for a house that was expensive. I put every cent that I have into my home. I am appalled that this building is going in. I have zero support for it. Thank you. I've raised my family here in a safe neighborhood. I can't understand how you guys paid $5 million for that lot. Who gave you the money? Was it given by the federal government? Was it given by the provincial government? Was it given by the City of Mississauga? It's our money. If Alvin, if this is part of you, I tell you, I swear I will do everything to stop this project. Whatever way I can do it, I will. And I can guarantee you, your vote, your popularity is probably on the floor right now. If this does not, if this project goes off, you will never, ever have any aspirations of getting elected again. This is ludicrous. There's a school across the street. There is a cannabis store across the street. There's a liquor store down the street. And for $5 million, if you guys flip the lot, you could go somewhere else, buy a cheaper lot, and put up 100 units in a better situated area. The money doesn't make sense to build a building there. It's too small of a lot. You're gonna take up Lakeshore, you're gonna stop the traffic, it's gonna be a friggin' nightmare. And the children, well, the children are right there, right in front, right behind, right on the side. Dairy Queen has lineups in the summer. And there's gonna be people getting ice cream, and the smell from the dope is gonna be incredible. I think this is pathetic, it is the wrong spot. You cannot go through with this. Cannot. Alvin, I want your support to stop this. Will you stop this? Will you stop this? That's my question.
Right, so there is a process that they're going through, right? There is not a vote. This is not a project that I have the power or capacity to stop, right? I'm sorry. Do you want to answer the $5 million?
So that's a good question. Where does charities get their money? So on any given year, any given year, about 20% of our operating comes from people like us in this room. On a typical project, we run a capital campaign, donor campaign. In this particular one, it's the federal rapid housing initiative money that we've been able to tap into. I really like the idea of Mississauga putting more money into supporting affordable housing. So that's something that we'll work on, but I don't think there's a lot of local money. It's primarily a rapid housing initiative that we've been able to tap into for this.
So there is no city funding. There's no city funding for this project.
So the reality is, I don't know where you're getting the number of $5 million from, but it's because it was 3.45 million. So I don't understand where some of these facts are coming from. But I think that underlying, I mean, the reality is that if we said we were putting up luxury rental housing, how many people would have a problem? Exactly. So this is where we're all taxpayers. We're all taxpayers, and so I think the reality is that so the reality is that taxpayers, we're all taxpayers, and we can all participate in the planning process. The reality is that this property has to go through this particular planning process, which is the zoning for this property is highly conducive to the project that's being developed as high quality rental housing. The tenants who are here, bravo to you for coming and thank you. And to your point about retribution, there's no retribution for complaining. There absolutely won't be. And I think that the reality is that when we hear these are, so the reality is that you know, there's Airbnbs, condo buildings, everybody has this problem of negligent tenants, and we know that that's real, and we're constantly trying to deal with it in a way that acknowledges people's complexity and holds out the responsibility that tenants have to meet our standards of behavior.
Just to jump on that, to speak about some of the concerns around, and what's the difference with supportive housing and what Indwell is proposing here. Because right now, Indwell has one building in this region, one building that has to do all of the things. And we're located where we are. We have folks who are without housing coming in close proximity to us, accessing the campus. When we have Streetsville operating and when we have Clarkson operating, we've got more options so that someone who needs support for their addiction can actually move to a place where they would be able to get that support. We've got more options because you're right, we're bound by the landlord-tenant board system. When we can have a few more options, we can actually help to streamline.
Look for groups that are aligned with our values. So we actually have about 25 commercial tenants. We do have a convenience store, we have a library, we have a fire hall, we have a bike co-op, we have a for-benefit restaurant, we have a coffee shop, the list goes on, there's 25 of them. So we're very interested in things that, exactly what you're talking about.
Sorry, I just wanted to add on, because you were talking about the commercial tenant, and I think we just sort of, one second, just talking about the need for the shelters right now. We, in the Region of Peel, are at 321% capacity in our shelters. 321% capacity this year from asylum seekers and refugees. We've petitioned the provincial and federal governments to provide us more support, but we're spending $3.5 million on hotel rooms to house people as much as possible. That's $42 million this year alone. Now, there is a continuum of housing that needs to be provided, and that is being invested in across the city and across the region. This is one of those cogs that help fit that and help move people along through the continuum of housing, so that from market housing to subsidized housing, supportive housing, affordable housing, and shelters. So all of that is contributing to this. The reason I wanted to bring up the commercial space is, you know, and the need for the food bank and those issues that we are facing. Every single month, the food bank is seeing an increase in demand since the pandemic started. We've recently had a motion at the Region of Peel where we added an extra $2 million to try and fund our food banks because they're at complete capacity. So the need for the food bank at the campus at the other Indwell site is incredibly important. The housing crisis is beyond what we've ever seen before. These two things are related. There are, unfortunately, 70 people of no fixed address who use the campus as shelters throughout the day. They obviously have a number of challenges, and the region is working hard in terms of staff to try and house them in a number of different places. The challenges that you might have heard of and see are related to the people who are unhoused in and around the campus. Now, that is not changing in terms of the campus needs to be there and the food bank needs to be there. But there is not a food bank going in this location, and it is not necessarily going to be a site where people who are unhoused are looking to congregate because there is no food bank. So while that need is incredibly important and that is being addressed at the other site, and we are trying to do everything we can to deal with the homeless issue that we have across the city, this particular location, I don't suspect, will have the same challenges that the Lakeshore Lofts has, given the difference in the tenant that you're going to have in the commercial space.
Thanks for that, Councillor. Can I just add to that quickly, Brian? I think, the comment Dirk made there, I think it was Dirk, I think that's a really helpful comment, because for us, we're constantly trying to evolve our program models and try to respond to what's actually needed in the local community. And we do have a strong track record of doing that. It involves complexity, it involves working through difficult things, but if you have ideas that are different than what we've heard and what we know is what's needed locally, we should look at that. We should talk about it. If there's people who are not able to leave the shelter because there's nowhere adequate to go, and kids are being uprooted from a stable childhood, that's a real issue. That resonates with us. So let's talk about that, because these designs are not fixed. We have not nailed down anything besides like a couple of the core facts. And the allies that we have at the city, at the region, they're professionals. They do their job really well. There's flexibility within what we've signed on to in commitments to the federal government for the funding that allow us to sort of meet the needs locally. So thank you for that maybe instructive sort of direction or suggestion that will allow us to go back. And if you have people that I think we'll connect with the folks from the shelter around some of these issues, because that is going to be very, very important to creating the right housing for this community that meets the needs that are definitely felt locally.
Hi, my question is for Alvin. So obviously you're an elected official, as is Charles Souza, and Indwell received federal funding in order to be able to purchase this land to move forward with this project. Per Charles Souza's office, he is not monitoring or overseeing anything that happens related to this project. If you did have any concerns, we are told to direct them directly to you. And what I'm hearing from you is that there's nothing you can do. So bottom line if the community is strongly against that this is not a good fit, there are competency concerns with how Indwell runs their other businesses, as evidenced by the people here representing other locations that they have. Plus, you can actually go online under the Freedom of Information Act and actually validate all the claims that other people have made. So if this is truly, Alvin, not a good fit for the community, and you represent the people, what are the people supposed to do to stop this sale going forward? My other point as well to Alvin, Indwell has made the comment that they want to be in a community where they are welcomed. I think it's very clear by the petition online and from what you've heard, and as this gains momentum, because quite frankly, there was not a lot of transparency. This was originally noted even on your website as affordable housing. That was the third bullet over on that PowerPoint that was shared earlier. This is this is supportive affordable housing, which is very different than the other bullet. So I think, in a way, a lot of people have felt misled, they feel deceived, and quite frankly, I think this is not a good fit for the community. And I just want to say, in honor of Carolina, who died in Leslieville, because at the end of the day, the community had gone to their counselors to say, yes, that safe injection site, even though that had good intentions, what did the drug dealers do? They knew where to target. So given that you put in a site like this, I don't care if somebody has been clean for a year, a drug dealer is entrepreneurial. They will target that and come into the community, and you're going to end up with blood on your hands as a politician. So I want to know, what can the community do to stop this moving forward and not have Indwell, that I would not trust as far as I could see them, run anything related to any sort of shelter?
Sorry, we are trying to have a meeting where we're hearing each other, so let's hear each other. So there is a process, obviously, that we were talking about that we have to fit in with the rules. The job of the city is to make sure developers, homeowners, builders, businesses are in compliance of those rules. We set the rules, we follow the rules that the province gives us, and we enforce the rules, right? So there are going to be site-specific issues that they are applying to in terms of the building form and the structure and the setbacks and the servicing, and it's our job as a city to approve those rules and whether or not they are following that. So there's the building standards, and that's something that we are going to enforce through the site-specific planning. There's also property standards. There's property standard bylaws that apply to everybody and every business or private homeowner. As a private enterprise or as a business enterprise, as a charity, they have to follow those same rules. But the city does not have the legal authority to let certain businesses operate certain developments. And our job is to facilitate these conversations. So the information that we put on the website are all provided for by the developers. Any applicant that is trying to build a building in Ward 2 gets put on the website so that they can have public consultation. This one was not necessarily one of those, but we did it anyway because obviously we felt that it was important, right? So in order for you to influence the type of people who are going in this building or the building form, the design, that is something that you as community members would work with the developer in order to do. I can represent your views and share that with them. I'm happy to be a conduit for that. I'm happy to be a conduit for that. So,
yes, can we?
So to answer your question there, ma'am, was that the opportunity to work with Indwell was the opportunity that we're trying to facilitate today and to have that move forward along the process.
At the end of the day, what you're saying is that this is a done deal. So this is a done deal. There's nothing we can do as a community. We're stuck with it given the federal government has already given that funding.
So I wouldn't say it's a done deal because they have not received site plan approval, nor have they received approval from the Committee of Adjustment if they need that, right? So they still have to go through the process. We can have community engagement with the developer, with the applicant, and that's what we're facilitating here.
So
hi, everybody. Can I just have a minute here? I know all of you are my neighbors.
She's next in line.
All of you are my neighbors, and a lot of you are business owners in the community, and I share your frustration. I just wanted to talk about process tonight. I know we need affordable housing. We all agree with that. But I'm hoping that you can take this back and learn from this exercise. This meeting should have happened 2 months ago, 3 months ago. All these neighbors that are so angry tonight might not have been so angry if they'd been told about this and given more information on this. I've been fielding, as the president of the local residents association, I've been fielding questions and emails constantly for a month. And I had to reach out to Indwell myself to find out more information to try to feed this back. We are a very welcoming community, but we do not like being blindsided. We have always had a great relationship with our counselor, and our counselor has always been proactive in talking with us and dealing with us before you move forward. And I hope you can take that as a learning experience, because I don't think it's fair to Indwell to have to deal with all this anger when this could have been sorted out a couple of months ago and had a lot of these questions answered then.
No, thank you, Sue. I think that's fair, and I think, you understand that the process did not require this meeting, but obviously we wanted to have this meeting so that Indwell can have that. I think the purchase date was October 19th, and then the announcement was November, 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks later. And so that's when I was informed that the site has been purchased and that they wanted to move forward. And before the announcement, I wanted to make sure we landed on a date so that we could have this community meeting. this was the date that worked for everybody, and we announced it at the announcement that we were going to have this meeting to address more questions. Could we have done that sooner? Yes, we probably should have tried to do that sooner, absolutely. But again, because it did not go through the regular planning and development process, there was no statutory requirement for them to inform anybody that this was coming down the road. As soon as I knew about it, I just wanted to schedule a meeting because I knew that residents would want to talk about it.
And can I add to that? I mean, I think if we'd had this meeting 2 months ago, you could help me, would it have been a different environment than this if we'd pitched a bunch of the similar things? So I think in a sense we haven't really lost time, and you haven't lost an opportunity, because we haven't made any decisions that are so final that they can't be changed around the program model, or who should be housed here, or issues of security, or whether we have an on-site concierge. Or those are all things that are open conversations, some of which we've heard the other night when we met with the craftsman community. And so I think that this, if we just turn this clock back, or we just thought that the conversation started today rather than it being too late, this is our first get-together. In practical terms, we are constantly listening, we're constantly open to feedback. We've given tours to folks from this community in Hamilton. We've talked to many people on the phone. We're very open to continuing the dialogue. And I think practically speaking, our goal is similar to some of those that we've talked to from here. How can we make this the best possible project that represents the Clarkson community as that inclusive community that isn't NIMBY, that isn't about we don't want poor people here or disabled people here, or whatever it is, fill in the blank. It's not about that, but it's about how do we create the best possible housing community that is affordable, that does offer support, safety, in that kind of environment for this community. So if in my mind, I'm experiencing what I hear you say as that meeting 2 months ago, it's not too late, there's no done deal about what this is set in stone. We have the opportunity to form it together, and it could have been, there definitely could have been. It's a shame that we had that level of hostility, and obviously some have had to leave, but that's okay. So our commitment to you, as a representative of a homeowners association, our commitment to the folks at the Craftsman, we said the same thing, and our commitment to Councillor Tedjo is that we'll continue to be open in dialogue and be able to shape the program, the housing community, to be the most reflective of what's needed locally, not something that's imposed from outside.
So we have a line going, like everything is directly to it though. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we have a long queue of people who are trying to answer.
Who's next? So, hello, my name is Ryan. So I don't work for Indwell, but I do work at...
We have a line over there, ma'am.
Elaine, would you mind just giving me a moment? So I don't work for Indwell, but I do work in homelessness, in mental health, and in addictions in Hamilton, and have some deep roots to this community. There's just two perspectives that I think are maybe being underheard tonight that I wanted to bring forward. The first is the perspective of unhoused folks. So a lot of the folks that I work with experience a really big gap in that first step from homelessness to living independently. There's a lot of risk in that gap. All of the challenges, the safety concerns that we're identifying tonight, which are very valid safety concerns, and I hope that they have been heard clearly, and I imagine they have, because if I was in your seat, I would be sweating and stuttering a lot. A lot of these concerns increase with homelessness, and they decrease with stable housing. As families and individuals are going through this process, that first step is massive, and we often see people re-accessing shelter and hospital because they aren't able to fully manage their needs in independent living, and there aren't enough stable, supportive housing environments for them to live in. The second perspective I think might be helpful is a professional one as someone who works in this field. And that's that I'm seeing, I'm kind of nervous in this conversation. And the reason why I'm nervous is because as far as the homelessness situation goes, Mississauga is about 5 to 10, maybe 15 years behind where Hamilton is. In large part because we don't have these services developed, because our historic solution to the problem has been to refer people to Toronto or to Hamilton. The challenge that we're facing now is that Mississauga is underdeveloped in its social services, and Toronto's full and Hamilton is full. So these people are stuck experiencing that risk in this community, and there's not enough options available for them. There's not enough stability, there's not enough safety. I think we can all agree in this room that one supportive housing building is not sufficient for accessing or for accomplishing our safety concerns, right? We've heard that pretty significantly, and even on stage, you guys have said that we need more of these. I would say that what I would caution us as we're having this conversation, and this is maybe potentially a too blunt way to put it, but I would be worried that we're walking into a hospital, looking around and say, hey, I'm noticing a lot of blood here, right? I can't imagine that the solution to housing stability is less stable housing units. And I can't imagine that the way you get through that gap of risk that so many people experience is by not allowing organizations who work in that gap to fill that gap. So I just want to add kind of those voices to this conversation.
Just quickly respond. Thank you for that comment. Our commitment is to continue the conversation with Mississauga around the spectrum of housing needs as Jess talked about. We have not suggested at any time that this project on Clarkson is to address those who are most acutely homeless. And so that, just will reiterate, is not the intention for this building. But we do know that in Mississauga, the reality of just being able to leave the community to go to Toronto or Hamilton is barely there anymore, and we need solutions that are local for local people who are experiencing acute homelessness.
I'm just recognizing the time.
We had 2 rooms full of people, smart, intelligent people, good neighbors. And we understand, and it's very clear to all of us that the benefit out of this meeting here, it's for the developers, not for the neighbors. Clearly. Now, my question is your corporation, your organization is for non-profit, right? So there is no directors, there's no profits, there is no profitability, there is no money. Where is the money going? Like let's say if you had access of taxpayers' money, benefits, profits, is it going to a shareholder? Is it a shareholder? For non-profit. Okay. If we non-profit, clear, no problem. So, Chair, so if it's taxpayers' money, if it's for non-profit, the majority of the money comes from the government. Why can the neighbor or the community have a choice, have a say where this housing is going to go? Why it has to go in their community? We overpay for the land. There is so many other lands out there that we can get for less money. That would be a benefit to the organization, right? And the neighbors wouldn't be so upset. And this community here, that you're trying to get 50 units on half an acre of land, which is going to have less parking. You're going to have to go for variance, and you might not get it, right? So I can't help it but thinking that the only reason that we're going to this community is because the zoning allows you guys to do the housing that you want to put on the community, very clearly.
So a couple of things there. One, yes, we are a nonprofit charity. Our core is people who, like you and I, who give of our money to make these things happen. You'll be interested, we actually have a social impact bond coming out, and you can invest too to get projects going. That's coming up in a couple of months. You can learn more about that on our website. You can also, if you want to know where the money goes, we have full transparency. Our financials are on our website, and I'm happy you can find them there. In regards to the site, we work really hard to find sites that are already, the community has zoned for the purpose of multi-residential housing. So if we wouldn't look at a site, for example, that's zoned employment land, because it would be very difficult to change. So you're absolutely right. We look for sites that were already within the community's done a consultation. It's already decided through official plans around the planning, and we work really hard to live within the existing zoning. Did the same thing on Lakeshore in Port Credit, worked within the zoning there, even though our neighbors all changed the zoning to get more height and more density. We worked within the existing zoning.
City of Mississauga has lost control on the zoning, and they allowed such a good location, such a great neighborhood, such a schools and young kids and families to do a development like yours.
So
I do hope that,
Yeah,
that,
I think
that
we'll
the
come back-
politics are very proud for what you guys are doing on to this neighborhood.
So I think the conversation about the who is going to live here, we're going to take that conversation back to the drawing board. We're going to take the conversation back to the community. We've had a lot of input from people tonight, and I think the conversation around, there's a lot of conversation to be had about the who. The actual what is pretty well established, that building multi-residential and a mixed-use project is allowed here, and we're not debating that. And I appreciate that nobody's debating the fact of can a building be built here like this. I think the who is the question, and how do we get to the right answer is an ongoing one. So thanks for that input.
So just recognizing the time, I think we want to.
It looks like there might be 3 or 4 more people in that, if that's the queue.
There's some more people over here. There's this gentleman who's had a question for a very long time as well. But like, if we can take maybe 3 more questions, and then I believe you folks are going to hang around for a bit longer and answer as many questions as people have as well. So if we could please go to this gentleman here who's been waiting for. Okay, so we'll go 1, 2, maybe 3.
Hi. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to thank the moderator and I guess I want to know what you're going to do. I'm so glad these people showed up from one of your homes, and I think you should have a paid duty officer on there. They have them at the roadside looking after construction sites and so on, so why shouldn't you put a paid duty officer, which may not be a long-term solution, but at least get rid of some of these people with the drug problems. They see police uniform, I think they're going to move. So I think maybe that should be one of your first priorities. The other thing is, you're wondering why you had such a good turnout tonight. And Graham, you're very articulate and a great speaker, and I admire you for that. But boy, you can misread a crowd. Just because they didn't cross their arms didn't mean we weren't angry and upset. This was the poorliest communicated, the best held secret in Mississauga, Clarkson. Everybody I spoke to, nobody knew about this. I approached Alvin over email. I voted for Alvin. I thought he was a great guy when he came to our door soliciting our vote. I sent him an email a few weeks ago suggesting that billboard tent type signing should have been posted. He had a billboard tent signing announcing the meeting that's going to make Mississauga safer on December the 7th with a picture of him smiling in Technicolor. I'm an old guy, Technicolor. But there was no tent. He said he was going to put up signage. I haven't seen one sign to announce this project. So I think the transparency word should not be used in this case. And that's why you had a good turnout tonight. Because people were spreading word of mouth, and boy, they're upset. Thank you for hearing me out.
I can actually answer the question about the roadside board, because that was my responsibility. I tried to get one for this meeting. However, based on the City of Mississauga has a limited amount of those sign locations where you're allowed to put these boards, and there was just no space within the Clarkson Village to have that sign. It's, please. No, yeah, that's.
I did say signs would go up, and that was my commitment to put signs up, and I told Ryan put signs up. But you know, if we weren't able, I didn't know until today that we didn't have a sign up.
Yeah.
But we could have put one on the church. Absolutely, I could have asked Jamie to put one on the church, and I didn't know that we didn't have one. We've had a number of community meetings over the last several months. We've actually had a community meeting almost every other night on a number of various topics. So we've used a number of them, but I do apologize. I've been trying to communicate as much as possible. If you're on the newsletter, we've been announcing it on the newsletter every other week that we send out our newsletter, our e-newsletter. And everywhere that, you know, we've been tweeting about it, messaging about it, and I know people have been talking about it. I hope people are aware of this. If they're not, obviously we're going to record it and post it, and they can learn more information there.
Hi, yes, my name's Kara, and I had a slew of questions, but I'm just going to narrow it down to saying that after listening to everything tonight, I'm still very confused about who Indwell is and how they have the ability to call themselves supportive housing providers. How are you different than just apartment builders, developers, other than you were able to get federal funds and put a certain category of people in your buildings? The word supportive is what I've been waiting to hear about mean. And the woman that spoke in the beginning, you rattled off a few terms that were very general, but we're talking about people who are very susceptible, they're hurt, they're suffering, their brains have changed from addiction, and I don't ever see just a year going by without needing support. And to hear from these folks that there's just 4 hours of someone watching the door at night, that's a security issue. But I was hoping to hear from your psychologist, your sociologist on staff, that type of thing. Prior to that, I saw it as a low-income housing building. And I had questions about it being 4 stories in a 3-story zone. And why is the base not looking like it has proper retail, which should be, if you're gonna drive a driveway through, 75% of the wall frontage of the road. And why do you have your office occupying a retail space? And why is the base of your building housing your community room when it should be for the people on the sidewalk, our community, more retail space? And then the housing units above should just be 2 floors, as I know it, and should be somewhat set back. I came here just to find out, and I've got so many questions, including where's our federal representative tonight? And how did you purchase the land without having this plan to begin with or come to the community?
So to speak to the question about supportive housing and what does it look like, it's been difficult to answer the question because honestly, it's early. We just bought the building in October, the site in October. And the process actually includes this: who's in the community and who needs housing in the community. So it's hard to give a straight answer. It's part of that dancing around it that you've been hearing, because it's early. We need to hear from the community what's the need here. We generally know that there's a need for affordable housing with support, so that kind of captures a group, and then we work from there. Because so the actual baseline reality is we all need support. We all have support. This is an incredibly supportive community of one another. We all need it. That's kind of an assumption that we all share, and we work from that. So in a standard support program, like the kind of program that we're talking about here, I can give you a couple of examples, but it looks like a whole lot of different things because people don't move in by diagnosis. So there is not a psychologist on staff. It's an apartment building. People don't move in by diagnosis. They move in by need for affordable housing with supports. So some folks are living with trauma. So if trauma is the situation, we need to meet with that person, but first we have to build trust because sometimes trauma doesn't show up right away. We get to know that person, we put in referrals with them, we meet with them, we become their phone call when they're maybe feeling unsafe, or if they need to move somewhere for a few days in order to have a break from their home, those kinds of things. If it's someone who is living with schizophrenia, we pay attention. When do they come off their baseline? You know, when they start to talk about this kind of thing, then perhaps that actually means that they're not doing so well. And we actually know their psychiatrist, and we know multiple psychiatrists within the community or within the hospital setting. So we can do this for different people, but we would actually know, and we'd be able to work with that person and say, hey, so we talk with our tenant, how is that going for you, what's happening? And maybe they'll disclose that. If they haven't disclosed it, perhaps there's consent to speak with their other community providers, so their psychiatrist, for instance, that we'd be able to speak with them. That's if someone's living with schizophrenia. If somebody's living with Alzheimer's disease, so tomorrow, we have staff, right, because we operate hundreds of units in some other communities. Right now, we just have one building. But in our other communities, we have folks who are meeting with Alzheimer's Society tomorrow, but the person themselves is having a hard time remembering that appointment, but they live in supportive housing. So the staff knows that that appointment is coming. So they make sure that the person knows that that's happening. I'm getting repeated texts because this person actually thinks that I'm their support worker. I'm sending it back to the staff team to say, hey, this person has this appointment tomorrow, so that they can follow through. And as their Alzheimer's disease progresses, to be able to see how long can they live in the community on their own. They were walking their neighbor's dog all the time. Actually, they're getting lost in the neighborhood now. And we're noticing that, and so are their neighbors. How long can this person continue to live independently? Because they want to. That's another kind of support that we do. We have a mom who had a brain injury when she was a child. That brain injury has led to progressive conditions. She's got 3 kids, and she's living with those 3 kids, and she wants to keep her kids. And you know what? We want her to keep her kids too. So we're working with her to ensure that she gets house cleaning. We meet with her so that there's people coming in to help her keep her apartment clean, that her kids are actually accessing the EA at school. It looks like so many different kinds of things. In a standard support program, people are not in an institution. It is an apartment building. They don't move in by diagnosis. They move in by a stated need for affordable housing. And we look for that, and then we meet people with what kinds of support they need. To speak to the addiction piece, this has also been difficult to speak about because addiction is difficult to speak about. Addiction is really, really hard, and there's so much stigma associated with it that it's even difficult to talk about it without arising some of that. But it's everywhere in our community. It is everywhere. And actually, statistics show there's very few solutions that work for addiction. We see this in affordable housing, absolutely. We see this at the Compass, but we see this in encampments. We see this actually in the rest of our community as well. It's in my neighborhood. So moving from that, recognizing that that's the case and it's difficult to talk about, when someone moves in and addiction starts to present itself, because it's true, people don't always want to share that kind of information. So sometimes that stuff that people don't disclose, that definitely happens. Sometimes people do disclose, and that's amazing, and then we can stream them toward a program that's going to be able to help them. The Lakeshore Loft program does not offer an addiction support program at this time. In time, as Streetsville comes online, that's our next hire. That's the next staff role. But the addiction support staff that we have in our other programs, we've actually been able to trace the pathway of different street drugs that are tainted across the province of Ontario because our addiction support staff are paying attention to what's happening in the communities. And these are things that are far bigger than any of us here in this room. So the addiction support program, our addiction support staff meet with tenants and build trust. And that is something that is very hard to build when you don't have stable housing. Building trust is key. Because people need to go through those stages of change, right? That you're familiar with, of pre-contemplative and contemplative and moving on to actually taking some steps. Building trust. then working with that person. We've got a number of tenants who are connected with Peel Addiction Assessment and the treatment system here is Park. We want to build trust with you. We absolutely do. And so moving... Yes, well, and this is, we're hearing from you as a community. So the addiction support staff come alongside people to get them connected to addiction support services. We also have folks who are connecting folks to perhaps go to rehab if that's something that they want to do. That's because we can't just have eviction be the only pathway. When someone is not living well, obviously that's going to happen sometimes, but it's also a very slow process, as we know. Also having the opportunities to engage in treatment and to make changes when people are ready. That's part of the work of our addiction support staff.
Hi there. I came and I really thought this was going to be a community meeting where people were being able to ask questions, listen, and ask another question. I've been in this room, the other room, and that's the only reason I haven't spoken up earlier. Instead, I've heard a lot of yelling, a lot of bickering, a lot of things without us actually keeping in mind that what Indwell is doing, what our city councilors, what Peel Housing told us, what the federal government is telling us is we have a huge problem. Affordable housing, addictions, all of those, and they're in our community already. It seems like many of you are saying we wanted to be consulted, we wanted to be heard. You are being heard, except we have homeless walking along Lakeshore. We have addictions. We have drugs in our high schools. Go to a hospital, go to a schoolyard, talk to the principals. It's a massive, massive problem. This is just to say that I really wished that it could have been I think that's why I'm embarrassed, actually. I've lived here for almost 25 years. I've raised my kids here, and I'm disappointed. Again, it's been over 25 years. I attend community meetings. I understand there's anger, but we can still be civil and we can still be without howling at each other. This is the beginning of a conversation. They've told us over and over. They don't have the solutions either, but at least if we'd be speaking with each other, we'd be coming up with better ideas as opposed to just shutting everyone down, including when I'm speaking, saying whatever it is that he said. So please, reflect on that it can be affecting someone you know already who just isn't telling you, or your kid or your grandson at school, or go to a hospital. And that's where you'll see it even in more dire straits. And that's where you'll see that maybe there is more wait times, because there's a large number of people with variants of issues and affordability. Getting stable housing is just the beginning. 50 isn't enough. We should welcome this, keep the consultation, keep the conversation.
Is this the last question? Is that what I'm understanding?
But I believe we have something from Charles Hughes' office here that, as I say.
And then
thanks, Ryan. So just wanted to address the federal representation question. My name's Galen. I manage Charles's local office here in Mississauga. I know I've already heard from a lot of you, emails, over the phone. Happy to continue to do so. Charles, as I was driving here from Ottawa, was voting in the House, was addressing the House of Commons in question period. So he couldn't be here, but I drove straight here. I wanted to be here. Haven't eaten since 1 p.m. because I wanted to make sure that I wanted to get here and hear from all of you so I could take that feedback back to Charles. Anybody has any questions about the federal role in this project, any questions, any concerns, our office is always open. Come approach me after. I'll hand you a business card. We're available to you anytime. Just wanted to put that out there.
So last question over here.
Last question.
Hi, my name's Claudia. You described your clientele as people who have experienced a lot of life challenges, might be living on a fixed income. You alluded to, parking lot where very few people may have cars, and they're also in need of an intensive support program. You've picked a location that has no grocery store near it, very few medical resources. It's a really weird corner that we live at here, because even to get two kilometers up the road, you have to take 2 buses and go into the GO station for the roundabout. I've been in education for 33 years now, and we have very similar issues, with challenges with our young people. And in our experience, the way that we've been able to support those people is with intensive programming and to intersperse them in small bits within the community. Now, I know that there's a ton of building happening much closer to where transportation is accessible, where groceries are accessible, where walk-in clinics are accessible, and it's not the lot that you bought. I think you need to look at your programming and think about the housing that's already being built, and perhaps Indwell can have some type of a partnership with the builders there and intersperse their clientele in larger buildings where they are really integrated in the community. But you've talked about really providing a room with a living room and a kitchen. There's no security. You are not bringing program to that building, so how the people are going to get to their support program is a bit of a mystery to me right now. It's going to be cumbersome, which leads me to believe, which leads me to believe that when they have the option of not going to their program because it's the path of least resistance, they're not going to go. They're not going to get out when it's cold and take 2 buses to get to go see their support person. You either have to have the support person living on site, or you need to make it easier for them to get there. So you need to be near a transportation hub. You also need to be able to get them the basic necessities of their living, conditions, be it groceries, be it medication, be it social worker support, be it psychology support, medical support, whatever it is that they need. Thank you.
No, thanks for that comment, and I think we've heard a lot tonight about what the program should be or what it shouldn't be, and I think that there's going to be lots that we can reflect on about how to refine the assumptions we made or the expectations we had to design the right building for the site, to design the right program model. And there's a lot of positives about this community. There's some drawbacks. You mentioned some of the transportation connections and other things that we need to take into account. The reality is that we do need a lot more housing, and we do need a lot more supportive housing. And how do we work together to make sure that we're designing the right program for this site that works for the people who are going to live there and works for the community that's surrounding us? So, on behalf of our colleagues, and behalf of the folks from the city, from the region, Councillor Tejo, thank you for facilitating tonight, coming together. Thank you to Jamie and the church here. We do appreciate the conversation and the dialogue, and we, I need to get a snack. But I'm happy to continue to talk while we let anybody who needs to leave. So thank you very much.
Just
I think there's one more question, but.
My name is Sue. I'm a resident of this community, my husband and I. We're pretty typical of the demographic of the people who are now walking out of this room. And I wanted to make a few comments and pose some questions, some takeaway thoughts for Indwell here. So we live in this community, we own a nice house, we have a 6-year-old who lives with us. All the concerns that have been raised by many of you here tonight. I also happen to have been a healthcare executive 45 years working in many of the large hospitals. I've worked frontline with people with dual diagnosis, people with developmental disabilities and mental health issues. I do a lot of volunteer work with people in this exact space that you're talking about here tonight. And I think we as a community don't have the background in education, and I don't mean education in a formal way. I mean, we don't have the exposure that has helped us to really understand what Indwell is bringing to our community, positive and or negative. And people, you know, when somebody said earlier, well, we wouldn't be objecting if this was a luxury condo that was being built here, and there was great clapping in the room. The implication being that people of wealth and social status couldn't possibly have mental health issues, and couldn't have drug addiction issues, and couldn't be thieves and other things is just outrageous. They are our neighbors. We have pedophiles in our community. We have drug addicts in our community. Our 6-year-old could be subject to being attacked by our next door neighbor. It's our job as a community to ensure that we are providing the structure and the things that keep our children safe, and whether we're talking about how we provide oversight to our children, or the policing, or all those different things from A to Z. But that doesn't mean we should throw people out of our community who need our supports. And I'm very happy to have a supportive housing provider coming into our community. I don't know Indwell. I know nothing about your organization. You're coming to our community. I'm happy to connect with you. I don't know what your supportive housing model looks like and how it's going to be workable in our community, but I've sure heard a lot of NIMBYism here tonight, and I am appalled that our community would be taking that kind of a position. And I'm happy to work with you to bring a good program to our community that will be safe for our children and our community and helpful to people who need support.
Well, so, well, let's,
Let's wrap up, guys.
Our friends from Indwell are still going to be here to, in the room over here to continue the conversation. There are still some snacks provided by the congregation of Clarkson Community Church. Please grab some snacks on your way out. If there's anybody who was able to attend tonight, our community meeting video is going to be online later this week, alvintejo.ca. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you, everyone.